Sorry, just waiting for the green light. There it is. All right. Well, welcome to the October 24th Planning Commission meeting. And you want to do call to order?
Commissioner Miranda.
Here.
Commissioner Lee. Here. Commissioner Strauss. Here. Commissioner Hamilton. Here. Commissioner Berube. Here. Chair Olson.
Here. Thank you. The next item is approval of the meeting agenda. And before we do that, we did have, did this get am I missing it? The Scott meal. So we were going to have a special recognition and presentation. We were going to have Scott Neal talk about the advisory board and commission minutes, but that's been postponed again, Carrie?
Correct.
Okay, so we'll take
shore
that
up a
off.
date specifically and get it correct next
All right,
time.
so that's been removed from the agenda. So does anyone else have any edits to the agenda or a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Is there a second? One second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. So next is approval of the meeting minutes from the October 10th Planning Commission meeting. Were there any edits or motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. So we have two public hearings tonight. The first is a variance request for 4601 Meadow Road.
Chair, members of the Planning Commission, this is a variance request for front yard setback for 4601 Meadow Road. The subject property is located on the east side of Meadow Road as highlighted. It is a single family home. It's a rambler with a tuck-under two-car garage. This is a survey of the property as it currently exists. It also is showing above it or within the footprint of the building, which is on the outside outer boxed area, a second floor addition that they are proposing. What you'll notice is that the front corner of the house is very close to what is considered the front lot line because the property along Meadow Road turns into a cul-de-sac at the very end, and a portion of their front lot line is curved along with the right-of-way of the cul-de-sac. So the closest point of their existing home is 14.1 feet away from their front lot line, which is considerably closer than the minimum setback that you typically see. Minimum setback in a standard subdivision is 30 feet. In an established neighborhood, it's the average of the homes on either side, which would be the average of 67 feet on the south and about 30 feet to the north. This is showing the floor area setback that they're proposing above the existing structure. There is no change to the building footprint with the exception of a front entry overhang with columns which can overlap into the setback area. It's hard to see from this graphic, but the actual required setback is this line that bisects the home. It's 3/4 of the home is non-conforming in terms of front yard setback. This gives you a little better idea of what the buildable area of the lot is. That's the area that's highlighted in yellow. This is the existing home today. It's a single-story rambler with a tuck-under garage. What they'd like to do is put a second floor above it. The second floor is actually underneath the roof line, so it presents as a story and a half home. This is the front elevation, the two sides, and then the rear. This is the existing main floor, which will primarily remain the same. There are 2 bedrooms on the main floor. It's a rambler with a tuck-under garage, so they would like to expand above to add additional bedroom area. The lines on the side that you see here, because the home is at an angle to the side lot lines, this is the required side yard setback for the second floor. They did not go out to the outer edge of that first floor. They've centered the second floor to maintain the setback from the side lot lines. However, they couldn't avoid encroaching into that front yard setback, going up above what's existing there currently. This is a cross-section, a building section of the home, and what you can see is that the second floor area is actually below the roof line, so it presents itself as a half story above that existing main floor. These are not the best photographs, I apologize for that, but this gives you an idea of the house as it exists currently, and then within the context of the neighborhood, putting that half story, it's a second floor, above that existing first floor with the tuck-under garage, the home that is to the north and then also to the west. And again, back to the survey and the orientation of the house. So the primary issue is the proposed variance justified. Are there practical difficulties that prevent a reasonable use from complying with the ordinance? The practical difficulty of the home on the lot is that the home is non-conforming regarding front yard setback. It is not squared on the lot. The front lot line is part of a cul-de-sac, so as you go further north, the corner of the house gets much closer. If you're driving along Meadow Road, you wouldn't get the feeling that this home is that close to the front lot line. However, given where the lot lines are, it is. The sharp angle of the front lot line, in the cul-de-sac, and the location of the angle of the house to the front lot line obviously is a design challenge. And are there circumstances that are unique to the property and not common to every similarly zoned property? The house has an existing non-conforming front yard setback on the west side of the house. The proposed second floor addition is within the non-conforming footprint of the existing first floor, so they're not asking to go outside of the already existing non-conforming footprint, but there is an alternate setback standard that would allow them to add on to the house on the first floor and also to the basement floor at the non-conforming setback, but once you are outside of any existing non-conforming floor, then that essentially is supposed to maintain the required setback. They can't just simply put a second floor over a non-conforming floor without asking for a variance. And will the variance alter the essential character of the neighborhood? Granting of the variance would actually be in keeping with the neighborhood. There are second-story homes actually adjacent to the home, and they aren't affecting adjacent properties in the sense that they're not getting any closer, nor are they expanding the footprint. The city engineer staff has reviewed the property regarding grading, drainage, erosion control, stormwater management. There's really no increase in impervious surfaces, and they're not going to be doing any significant grading, so they're really not going to be changing any of those drainage patterns. Staff does recommend approval based on the survey date stamped September 1st, 2018, the elevations and building plans date stamped September 21st, 2018, and compliance with the conditions listed in the engineer's memo. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any questions for Chris? Commissioner Lee.
Chris, can you just clarify the language of what the recommended action you are asking the Planning Commission to do?
The action is for a 33.6-foot front yard setback variance for 4601 Meadow Road, given the average that's required to be maintained. They will actually be further away from the front yard setback than the existing lower level.
Okay, so under recommended action, it says approve are we approving the setback was actually for the east side? Is that correct? Not the north side?
Oh, I apologize. Yeah, it would be from the east side.
So it's
from the front yard.
14.1 foot yard side yards.
That's how close it would be. That's how close it is to the front lot line.
Right.
But they're asking for a 33.6, if you go to the first page of the report, under the subject, it's a 33.6-foot front yard setback variance is what they're requesting.
Okay. Thank you.
And I know that we did get one comment from a resident who couldn't be here, and they're on the rear side. Do you remember that one, that comment? Anyway, so there's trees on the lot that are not being removed, or is that?
Correct.
Okay.
There are no plans to remove the
Okay.
trees. I believe the one comment you might be referring to is a resident that lives behind
Yes.
the property. They're not getting any closer. The change is they're getting higher. So perhaps they could be more visible with the second floor.
Okay. Great. Any other questions? No? Great. Thank you, Chris. And so is the applicant here? Would you like to speak?
Appreciate you guys' listening. I guess for sake of background, my wife and I moved to this house in Edina in 2015, not necessarily with the anticipation of doing a remodel as this, with us just welcoming our second daughter to our family. Since being in the house, we've recognized quickly that we needed some more space, and with an effort to stay in Edina and stay, frankly, in this part of Edina, which we truly cherish, this was a good option for us relative to moving and trying to, kind of purchase something of the nature that could fit us. With that, it was our sincere intent to work with our architect to, create a finished product that would fit with the nature of the neighborhood, and not create something that is necessarily oversized for the block. And if there's further questions, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, we sincerely kind of appreciate any comments.
Thank you. Were there any questions for the applicant? No? Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so it is also a public hearing. And we'll open the public hearing. And yeah, so it's if you can come up. Yeah. So just go to one of the sides and you get the green light, then it turns red, and then you have to sit down. So just state your name and address first.
Thank you. My name is Keelan Kane. I live at 4600 France Avenue South, directly behind the property. And it was my neighbor who shares a wall with our townhouse who did send in a letter. Her concern is that she has windows on the west-facing side of the building that she wanted to point out will look into the windows of the new addition, and that'll go back and forth. So people should know that. I'm glad to understand. I think I understand that the footprint isn't changing, so it's not coming any further into the backyard towards our homes. My question also is, how high is it going to go? The house next to it, to the south of it, did have a recent second-story addition, and it is higher. I think it will be higher, or that building is higher than the proposed height of the building in question, because the topography is such that the building in question is a little lower than that. But I'm just wondering how high the roof line will go. Thank you.
Get that answered when we're done. Are there any other comments from the public? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Great. So, Chris, is that an answer that you can?
Yes, actually, building height is measured from the front elevation. What they're showing in your plans, and it's kind of small, I believe from grade to where the garage opening is, and that isn't where, from a zoning ordinance standpoint, we would start measuring, but they're showing it on the elevation. To the top of the ridge, it's It's under 30 feet. It's, I think, under 29 feet. From average existing grade from the front, we would measure to the top of the ridge. It's still going to be under 27 feet, so it's not terribly tall. It's from the back, it would be lower because the grade is going to be higher.
Comment?
Do I read that site plan right, that there's a 14-foot grade change from front to back? The back is
Yes.
14 feet higher at the property line?
Yes, there's quite a change.
Yes.
Yes. But we don't measure from the
No,
back
I
of the
understand
building?
that. It's just the reality of where the house behind it is. It's
Yes.
14 feet higher than this house. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Chris, do you happen to know the height of the existing house now, the roof? I think that was the question. How much higher is it going to be than the existing?
I don't know that. They did not have that in the plans.
Okay, any other comments? Questions? Motions? Do you have a comment? Yeah, we're in discussion, yeah.
So I was looking at these plans. I think it is always nice to see a home that's not in a state of tear down and completely reconfiguring the footprint, the foundation. It makes sense and very reasonable that, given the size of the home, that this is a great way to kind of add for a growing family. I did appreciate the fact that, in fact, the second floor is built into the roof, so it could have been a whole nother second story with a roof on top, height permitting. I believe our ordinance allows closer to 35 feet, I want to say, 36 feet overall, so this applicant actually chose to keep it significantly lower than what could have been allowed at the maximum. I thought the treatment of it, actually architecturally, is very well done. So it's definitely in keeping with the existing house and also in matching with the neighbors. There was just one comment, this is a personal comment, but that perhaps the upper story could benefit from a dormer, the bedroom up on the, I'd say the left side of the house. It looks like there's no windows on that side, and I don't think that would add any roof height to it, and you might actually gain a little more space in it. So that's just a comment for the homeowner. But I find this a good treatment and a good explanation, so I would support the variance request.
Thank you. Any other comments or motion?
Move to approve the front yard setback variance for that. I think that's the east property line, as recommended in the staff report.
Second? I'll second it. Any kind of comments, discussion? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, so next on our agenda is a comprehensive plan amendment, a preliminary rezoning and preliminary development plan for 7200 and 7250 France Avenue.
People are rushing in now to get good seats.
The site that we're reviewing this evening is one you're all very familiar with. It's in the greater Southdale area, 7200 and 7250 France. It wasn't on. Okay. I'll start over. The comprehensive plan and rezoning proposal before you is located in the greater Southdale area, 7200 and 7250 France on the west side of France. The property is about little over 5 acres in size. There are a couple of office buildings that exist on the site and a parking ramp that's in an extremely poor state of repair. Property is currently zoned planned office district. It's highlighted in orange, adjacent to duplexes to the west, the Sunrise Assisted Living to the north, single-family homes to the west and north. The site is guided in our comprehensive plan for office residential. It's that entire pink area along the west side of France. Maximum density that's allowed in the comprehensive plan, or units per acre, for this area is a maximum of 30 units per acre. The site is within our building height overlay districts. There's a maximum height of 4 stories and 48 feet. So the proposal, specifics of the proposal is to construct 2 6 to 7 story apartment buildings with retail on the main level. There would be 299 units between the 2 buildings. The north building would be 169 units, the south about 130. There's also 10 owner-occupied townhomes located on the west side of the site as it transitions into the neighborhood. Notice here that there's about a 60-foot wide strip of existing vegetation that would remain on the site. There would be 30,000 square feet of retail underneath the 2 buildings, considering a restaurant, about a 4,000 square foot restaurant within each of those buildings. All of the parking would be located underneath the building, so there would be no exposed parking lots. Notice that there is a north-south wooner proposed through the site. This rendering indicates it's all pedestrians walking along there. Vehicles would be available, probably more vehicles than pedestrians, but as one of the access points would be here, and then we'll take a look at a shot that shows that better, but another access point in between the 2 buildings. 20% of the area would be dedicated for affordable housing units per our affordable housing policy. That could be up to about 62 units, so pretty significant in helping achieve our affordable housing goals. Access to the site would be off of 72nd, this location here, and off Gallagher. And as you recall, as part of our sketch plan, there was conversation about proposing the access right in, right out off of France. At that time, the county wasn't open to allowing that. However, since staff has had a lot of discussions with the county, and they are open to approving that right in, right out. So that's looking good at this point. The applicant did go through a sketch plan review through Planning Commission and Council. There's also been a number of reviews by Mick Johnson of AFO, and his comments have been included in your packet. And the applicant has addressed a few of those. Just quickly, that was the sketch plan. Some of the more noteworthy changes would be a reduction in the width of the wooner. 95 feet was proposed initially. That's been narrowed down to about 80 feet in that location, and 50 feet to the south. More notably, as Mick was suggesting in his memo, is bringing the building in at the corners. Once the building height hits 60 feet, then stepping it in. And the applicant has provided some new graphics. I emailed them out to you this evening, but I'll also show them. You'll see a little bit more specific on the changes that they are proposing in addressing those comments from Mick. So again, those these noteworthy changes from the sketch plan. So these are the areas where they have brought it in. So here's the plan. This is the plan set that was included in your packet. The changes would be in this location here, and then to the south at the edges. Also want to point out that this 7th story element in the building, that has been removed, so that would just be 6 stories. So here you can see where they've stepped in at the 60-foot mark, stepping that in, and then that rooftop element has been removed. So this is now flipping around to the other side of the building, and you can see where they have stepped that in, both along France and along Gallagher. Here's another view. So this is standing at France and 72nd. So this is the plan set that was included in your packet, and this is the change. So you can see a little bit more dramatic on this side. And also you can see here where they've stepped it in also. And so this is the Gallagher entrance in France. Again, this is the plan set included in your packet. And they've reduced that top element and stepped in the 6-story element. Now, as you know, we're going through the Greater Southdale area, the small area plan, the design experience guidelines. We haven't finalized any of that, but some of the draft documents, we've been talking about a 60-foot height limitation potentially coming forward in that design experience guidelines. So that's where this stepping in at the 60-foot, at that 60-foot height comes in. I had a conversation with the developer and asked him, could they remove that entire 6th level and just done the 60-foot? But just given the pro forma and the number of units that would be lost, they're not able to make that much of a significant change. So again, just moving through the site. Again, here's the Woonerf. This is the drive entrance. The applicant will go into the plans in a little more detail. This is the Woonerf off of that right in, right out off of France. Again, the amenity area. This is that north-south Woonerf in the back. One issue that has come up, and I didn't include this in your packet, there's a number of antennas that are located on the existing building, cellular antennas. So if this project moves forward and is approved, they need to relocate those antennas while construction goes on. So what they're proposing, and this is coming from the cellular company, is to temporarily locate a pole. This is similar to the Millennium Project you might recall about a year or so ago. There's going to be a temporary pole set up on that site too. So once the buildings come down, this temporary 75-foot pole would be located here. Once the building is completed, then those antennas move back onto the building and the pole is removed. So this request before you requires an amendment to the comprehensive plan, and again regarding a number of units that are allowed per acre. The amendment before you is just for these 2 sites. As you know, we're going through the comprehensive plan amendment. So rather than making that large-scale change, this amendment before you would just be for these 2 sites. And then a rezoning to planned unit development. And that's where we would require that. That's where the city has the ability to require the affordable housing, where it's put right into the ordinance. And then the rezoning would be subject to only the development of these plans. So in review of the site plan, just quickly, the parking that's required based on all of the uses would be 686 spaces. They're proposing 590. It's about a 1.5 parking stall per unit. And then the retail portion is just slightly under what would be required by code. Wenck and Associates have done a parking study, and they found that the parking is more than adequate to support this project. Ed Terhar is here from Wenck to answer any questions that you might have. Wenck also did a traffic study and determined that the level of service based on this project would not change at any of the key intersections within this development. They also did a comparison of how would this project compare to a code-compliant medical office building. So based on the size of this site, you could build a 113 square foot medical office building that again would be code compliant. And the comparison of those two would be, there would be 30% more traffic generated from that medical office use than what's proposed here. The total number of trips would be 3,539 for that medical office, whereas this proposal will be 2,762. Mr. Terhar will make a presentation to the Planning Commission at the conclusion of my presentation. In fact, maybe what we could do is, at the conclusion of my presentation, ask Ed to come up and he can present his findings, and then we can both answer questions after that. In terms of stormwater, so this site, this whole area in the back is a low point in this neighborhood. It takes runoff from the property to the west, off of 72nd, off of France. They're taking on a lot of water on this site. So what this proposal does, while it's not capturing water at the surface, it is handling this problem area. So they would be taking on not only the runoff from their site, but from adjacent sites. So it is quite a benefit to the neighborhood in terms of controlling that stormwater. In terms of pedestrian movements, there will be significant pedestrian circulation improvements all around the building. Again, through the site with that WUNRF. Also availability of a bike connection through to the regional trail. Also want to note, really a high point of this proposal is the added public space. So again, this whole WUNRF here there would be easements to the public where we'd be able to walk through the site, all around the site. The setback from the building to the edge of the curb is 50 feet per the Greater Southdale, the framework document, and it's actually 40 feet on the north, and then anywhere between 30 and 50 feet on the south. So quite an extensive public space around the two main buildings. Again, I touched on the access to the site, the right in, right out off of France, and into the building in those two locations, and one access point off of that WUNRF to the south. This also is the access point for the townhomes to the west. Shadow study was done and determined, as you can see here, there's really no shadow that extends into the neighborhood to the west. The most significant would be in the winter solstice time, where shadows would cross France, but no significant shadows to the neighborhood to the west. We also, as we've gone through this table a number of times with requests for taller buildings, we do have an existing zoning standard that requires a certain setback based on the height of a building adjacent to R1 properties. So with the 7-story element of this project would require a setback to the residential district 4 times the height of the building. So that's indicated in this diagram here. So the 7-story element would be in this location, and the closest R1 property is right here at the intersection of 72nd and Linn-Mar. So based on the height of the building, a 344-foot setback is required. And this distance is about 460 feet, so well within the requirement there. For a building that's 5 and 6 stories, the setback needs to be 2 times the height. So that measurement here at the 5-story element is 320 feet, and what would be required is a 120-foot setback. So again, well within that R1 setback requirement for height. Flexibility is requested through the PUD, mainly for setbacks. The height of the building, again, this is a 4-story and 48-foot zoning regulated area, and the FAR would exceed 1.0. And again, they would be requesting flexibility in the number of parking stalls required. So this diagram just shows the required setbacks. 50 feet to France, the building to the property line is actually 40 feet. Would be a 90-foot setback to the west. Again, this is that wooded area. So primary issues for the Planning Commission to consider: is the comprehensive plan amendment regarding density reasonable for the site? And is the proposal reasonable to justify the PUD rezoning? So first, in regard to the comprehensive plan amendment, staff is recommending approval, so we do agree that the comprehensive plan density is reasonable for the sites. Higher densities are typically located along arterial roadways. Again, the OR district is located on France Avenue, which connects to Crosstown and 494. Densities that we've been talking about in the greater Southdale area is between 80 and 100 units over the whole of the district. The existing comprehensive plan allows between 100 and 150 units in between France and York. So the idea being that along the edges it would be a lesser density. This particular project would be up to 60 units an acre. So that seems a reasonable density on that west side. We've approved projects on the west side of France in the past that have exceeded 60 units an acre. The Avenue on or the Aurora on France project is 80 units an acre up by the hospital. And then, of course, on the east side of York, the Aria Edina, that was approved at 100 units an acre. So again, the site located in that OR district. I've included that same table of comparing densities from our surrounding communities, Minnetonka, Minneapolis, Bloomington, Richfield, St. Louis Park. This is consistent with those more commercial mixed-use areas, so we're in keeping with our adjacent communities. And also, most significantly here is Met Council has given us a goal to provide 878 new units of affordable housing by the year 2030. So this 62 units included, at least 62 units included in this project, would go a long way to help us achieve that goal. Allowing higher densities is one of the tools where the city can help to promote or achieve affordable housing. And again, the traffic study done by Wank concludes that the project can be supported by the existing roadway. In regard to the PUD, we believe that's reasonable also. It addresses some of the development principles in the greater Southdale planning framework vision. They've divided the property into smaller blocks. They're providing that north-south, what we're calling the western promenade west of France to hopefully continue on parallel to France Avenue. The improved pedestrian connections through and around the site, providing that additional public space. Public art would also be included, and again, the provision of affordable housing. So we believe it meets the PUD zoning criteria, again, creating a more pedestrian-friendly development, high-quality building, 20% affordable housing, and creating a more creative site design for the site. Again, I went through the height, then that it meets that R1 setback in terms of the height to R1 properties. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the comprehensive plan amendment and the rezoning subject to the findings and conditions in your staff report. I should note actually 3 items that I would suggest that if the Planning Commission is leaning toward an approval recommendation, that you add 3 conditions. 1, we received the memo from our sustainability coordinator just today, and we've handed that out, and it's in front of you this evening, that we require that those conditions that she's asking for be included. And also, I didn't make it clear in the recommendation that the comprehensive plan amendment is just for these 2 sites. So just to make it clear that it's just for 7200 and 7250, and that temporary pole that I mentioned, that needs to be removed once the buildings are constructed and the antennas are relocated onto the building. So with that, I will call up Ed Terhar from Wank Associates to present the transportation study, and after that we can answer any questions you might have. Okay, I'll get you a mic. Microphone. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ed Terhar. I'm a traffic engineer with Wank. We're located at 1800 Pioneer Creek Center in Maple Plain. And I'll give a summary of the traffic and parking study that we've completed and then be available to answer questions. When we started the project, we had a discussion with city staff about what the study area should be for this project. And as you can see on the map here, we've included the major intersections near the project and then the access points for the proposed project as well. So the intersections included in the project were France and Hazelton, France and 72nd, France and Gallagher, France and Park Lawn, and then over to Gallagher and Park Lawn as well to include that connection. The existing site, as Carrie mentioned or touched on a little bit, I just wanted to touch on that a little bit regarding the existing access points. So the 7200 building has 2 access points on 72nd, and then there's also like a drop-off pickup type area in the front that does not connect into the site. So that does have 2 access points technically on France, but it doesn't connect within the site. And then the 7250 building has 2 access points on Gallagher, out to Gallagher at those locations. The proposed project then has just the 1 access point on 72nd, 1 access on Gallagher, and then the access on France, which, as Carrie mentioned, the county has agreed to allow a right-in, right-out at that location. When we started the study, that decision hadn't been made yet, so we actually looked at 3 access alternatives for that location. One would be a right-in, right-out. Second one was a right-in only, so eliminating the right-out, and then the third was no access. So we wanted to see what that would do to the analysis if that were the case. I'll still talk about that, but the county has agreed to allow a right-in, right-out at that location. The next step then was to develop the traffic forecasts, and based on the trip generation information from the Institute of Transportation Engineers, we developed the trip generation, weekday trip generation for the project. And what I'm showing here is the proposed project on the top, so breaking it down by building, the 7200 building with the number of units, dwelling units, we assumed a restaurant and then retail space, generated in the weekday AM peak hour a total of 90 trips, PM 121, and then a daily total of 1,406. The 7250 building, slightly lower number of dwelling units, also a restaurant, and then some retail space, generated a total of 82 AM peak hour trips, 120 PM peak hour trips, and 1,356 daily trips. So the project total, before any removal of the existing buildings, and I'll touch on that next, is shown on this line here. So 172 AM, 241 PM, and then 2,762. Now the existing buildings are occupied, they do generate traffic. So those numbers then are removed from the system prior to adding the new trips. And you can see that the existing building, 7200, is a 39,600 square foot office building, generates 46 AM trips, 46 PM trips, and then 386 daily. And then the 7250 is a 55,000 square foot medical office, 72 AM trips, 69 PM trips, and 695 daily trips. So the total net added is shown on the bottom line here. In the AM, we're adding 54 total net trips, 126 PM net trips, and then 1,681 weekday. As Carrie mentioned, we then also, for comparison purposes, included a medical dental office building of 113,000 square feet. And you can see that use would generate 282 AM, 352 PM, and 3,539 daily. So if you compare that to the project total, you can see it is higher than the project total even before the removals. The trips then were then assigned to the roadway system based on these distribution percentages, which are based on the existing traffic volumes that we collected at all of the intersections, including data on 72nd Street, to the north and to the south on France, and then to the east and west on the other local streets, Hazelton and Park Lawn. The detailed traffic volumes then I didn't include those figures, but they are in the report. We actually have 3 sets of numbers, as I mentioned, one with the right-in, right-out, one with the right-in only, and then one with the no access. And those are included in the report itself. The intersections then were analyzed to determine if there's adequate capacity at all those locations. And what we found was that based on the number of trips expected for this project, the surrounding intersections do have adequate capacity. There were not any improvements recommended at any of those intersections included in the study. As I mentioned, we did look at 3 different access options. The option with the right-in, right-out actually results in the least amount of traffic that would use the 72nd access or the Gallagher access. Kind of makes sense if you have 3 access points versus 2, the traffic is spread out a little bit more. So there's actually less traffic on the 72nd and the Gallagher access points with the right-in, right-out option. We then looked at a little closer at the impacts on 72nd Street to get an idea for how what will happen there. And as you're aware, 72nd Street is an east-west connector from France into the neighborhood area. It also has connections to Cornelia and Wooddale that bring it up to 70th. We spent some time observing traffic out there and also collecting some video at the existing access locations. And traffic out there is a combination of local trips, neighbors that live in the area that are accessing France or going to 70th, as well as through traffic. There's through traffic that comes from France or comes from 70th and does travel through the area. It's a connection that's available and it is used. The existing volume, you can see on the table on the bottom, it was 1,980 vehicles per day on 72nd. And with the forecast, we are showing that when the existing uses are removed, that would reduce it by about 160 vehicles per day. The proposed project would add 410. And in a 2021 scenario with the project in place, the proposed project, the volume would be, we're predicting it to be 2,230. So an increase of about 250 vehicles per day on 72nd Street. The parking analysis was also based on ITE data. They have information for parking usage, and we found that the weekday peak would be between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. The peak from that information was 419 spaces, and the proposed, so therefore the 590 proposed spaces are adequate to accommodate that. The bicycle and pedestrian accommodations, there are, the design is set up to accommodate both pedestrians and bicycles. There is access to the trail, regional trail, provided at the Gallagher Drive crosswalk, which is at the traffic signal. We would recommend that there's some detail put into having bicycle parking on the site, both short-term and long-term. The short-term would be more oriented towards the retail and the restaurant customers, and then the long-term for the residential, for the residents. Either provided on site, outside or within the building itself. And then the provision of a bicycle maintenance station would also encourage bicycle use. So overall, was encouraged with what we saw with the bicycle and the pedestrian provisions. Also wanted to provide to you some information on weekday trip generation comparison. We looked at both the proposed uses for both a Saturday and a Sunday. And what you'll see here is the first line is the weekday, which is the same as the previous table that I showed you, but the actual peak hour is the 5 to 6 p.m. with 241 trips, and the daily is 2,762. The Saturday actually has a similar or the same peak hour based on the ITE data, and has slightly higher trip generation for the Saturday. 251 trips for the peak hour, and then 2,844 for the daily. The Sunday actually peaks earlier based on that data, 10 to 11 a.m., and has slightly lower numbers, 215 peak hour and 2,324 daily. So overall, they're similar in nature. Nothing is drastically larger or smaller for those different time periods. So with that, that's the summary I have at this point, and I'm available to answer questions as is Carrie.
So it's open. Commissioner Strauss, go.
Yes, Mr. Terhar, that right in, right out on France Avenue.
Yeah.
were you party with discussions with Hennepin County?
I was
Or-
not. It was Chad
I know there
Milner.
was a lot of,
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't know the answers before. It was anticipated that they might push back against coming out, doing the right out, and then trying to jump over 3 lanes and making a left. Was that, how did it?
I wasn't
Were they not
involved.
concerned with that anymore, or?
I don't know the answer. I wasn't involved in the discussions. I know that it was brought up at some discussions, and I don't know if Carrie has more background on that.
Yeah, I don't know the details of the discussion. Their concern was mainly the spacing in between the 2 intersections was too close to provide another opening. But they seem open to that idea. We would need to sit down with them to talk about any design changes potentially, right, like a right turn lane.
They weren't requiring a dedicated lane only so people couldn't make that shift? I mean, they evidently came
That's
around.
a potential, but we need to have, we haven't had those
Okay.
detail for how can it be accommodated yet.
Okay, thank you.
Lou, did you have a question? Or was it, oh, sorry, it was Sue, not Lou.
Thank you for your report. That was very helpful. I was just looking at, so on the numbers of the office scenario you did, I noticed
The
there.
medical office?
Yeah, if it
Okay.
were to be medical office, it was something like 35, 39 trips generated.
Yeah.
And you noted that this was higher than the number of trips if it were sort of this mixed use with residential. Why would the office, it's currently office, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so 35, 39, and I think you had another figure of 1681 for what the existing building currently generates. How come it almost doubles?
It's based on the use. The regular office space is quite a bit lower than medical dental office. Medical dental office is going to have people coming in for appointments on a frequent basis, and therefore it is quite a bit higher than a regular office, where it's more just people coming in the morning and then leaving in the afternoon.
Okay, so the current use of the building right now is just office?
At 7,200.
Okay.
At 7,250, it's medical office.
Okay.
And those were actually based on actual counts we did at the driveway. That is generating less traffic than what ITE would show.
Okay. And then is there also part of that increases that it's probably going to be a bigger building? And
It
then-
is, yes, it is a
Yeah.
much bigger building, right?
Okay. And then looking at your weekend trips,
Yeah.
so you noted that on the weekend, it actually is pretty similar to weekday. However, if it had been an office medical use building, there probably wouldn't be those numbers at all on Saturday and Sunday?
Right, it probably would be quite a bit lower. Saturday, it would really depend on the use. I mean, some clinics are open, or medical offices are open on weekends. They may have shorter hours. And then Sunday, you probably would probably just have deliveries or, smaller number of trips on a Sunday.
Right. So as a total, if we were to look at this as being sort of the ballpark figure of what this new use is going to be, we would have to consider all of this, the weekday, the Saturday, and the Sunday numbers totaled for this new use.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it day by day.
Okay.
I mean, you wouldn't add them all together, but you
Yeah.
look at it day by day, and yeah, certainly there are impacts on each day.
Okay. Great, thanks.
Sure.
Any questions on this side? No? I have a couple quick ones. So you also had a table, I think it was, showing the impact on the neighborhood or on 72nd.
Right.
And did you also do a comparison if it was medical office, what that would
Yeah,
impact would be?
Yeah, I did that calculation, and I think it's about 100 vehicles per day larger. I don't show that on there. Yeah, I looked that up quick. So we're showing there 2,230, and if it was medical office, I figured it would be, let me get to the right page here, 2,350. So about 120 more.
More. And then, okay, and so just to be clear too, the access point on 72nd is also just a right in, right out, correct?
Well, we assumed it was a full access. That was what was shown in the original
Okay.
site plan, and that's what's shown on the original documents. If that is changed,
Okay,
that could have some impact on this.
all right, it would
It
have
it certainly could,
if
yes.
it turned into a right in, right out,
Right,
that
you
would
would-
reduce the,
That would reduce it, yeah. You'd still have people coming, they could come in from the west and make the right in, but if they were, if the left out was eliminated, that obviously would reduce it, right? But this assumes a full access.
okay. And I know I was sending some emails today, and this probably isn't, but to talk about the Wooner, because, you know, it's being, and we'll have the developer address this too, but, you know, that's definitely going to, that's a lot of traffic that's going to be using the Wooner. And so did you look at that to see how well that's going to work with the amount of traffic that's using that as a street and versus the pedestrian and active space? And
Right, we did have those, a little discussion today, and I did look at that a little bit closer. I think the volumes that are shown on each axis are reasonable for the wound roof. My concern would be more about controlling the speed. And so I think that there needs to be some more discussion about that to make sure that and you raised that point too about traffic calming. So the point about, you know, the advantage to a wound roof is that cars are moving slowly. They're you know, if they're interacting with pedestrians, they're moving slowly, maybe even at the speed of a pedestrian, which is only like 4 or 5 miles an hour. That's very slow. So there needs to be items in place to reduce the speed, I think would be the item I would have question about.
make a note of that. Okay. Commissioner Nutter? Yeah, go.
Thanks, I appreciate it. This is a question for Carrie. Just kind of setting a stage. One of the concerns, I think, with this project that's come up, or I think it will be vocalized later tonight, is the use. Could you explain what could be built on this property without getting any that would be code compliant? Because I believe the use, if it were met zoning requirements, would be a permitted use. The PUD doesn't change the permitted uses at this site. Is that correct?
The uses that would be allowed on the site today would be primarily office. It is zoned for office uses, so medical office, the regular office that's there today, does allow some limited retail. Okay. So retail and office are the uses that are allowed under current ordinance. The PUD would allow a new use, and that would be the residential element.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for correcting my misunderstanding, Carrie. Thank you.
I thought it's OR, so residential.
Yeah, so the comprehensive plan guides the site for office and residential use. So the comprehensive plan contemplates the residential use. So in order to do residential on this site, they need to rezone.
Anyway, were there more questions for traffic? No, okay, you can stand. So Carrie, do we have questions for Carrie? I've got some. Do other people have questions for Carrie? What are my questions? So can you clarify again what the final height is and what the final number of stories that's being proposed?
Yeah, so there is what I'm calling the 7-story element is really, it's almost like a mezzanine. It's a higher ceiling in that portion of the building, and the maximum height there is 86.5 feet. So that's where I measured the setback requirements from. That 5th story that I was pointing out earlier, that's at 60 feet, a little below 60 feet actually.
So it's the majority is 60 feet. You're saying that mezzanine is the 86.5.
Correct.
Can you show that?
Yeah,
on the
can you show
screen?
that again too? That'd be good. I was going to ask the same thing.
Thanks.
Okay, so this portion here, that's the 86-foot area. The 60 feet is this element here. And the top of the 6-story, this is, I believe it's in the 72-foot tall in this area here.
Those are all the questions. Do you have a question?
Could you go back to that one? I think you had a nice shot from the corner when you were first explaining it at street level. Maybe that was it. That was it. I don't know. And could you show it there on the 60 feet?
Yes, so 60 feet would be right here. The 72 up here, and then the 86 would be, nope, I'm sorry, right here.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions for Carrie? Sure, go for it.
Carrie, could you show what is the traffic flow onto and off of the site? I guess I just need to understand, there's several entrances, but certain people are only going to use it, or maybe it's not, I don't know, just people in the project, where can they turn? I know you said right in, right out, but what happens on 72nd and also Gallagher?
So access would be available off 72nd, right here. Looks like they're showing the right in, right out. Also would be available off of Gallagher onto the Woonarf here. And then that right in, right out off of France would be right here. And then these interior arrows, that's the access into the underground parking.
So if someone's coming west on 72nd, can they turn left into that project?
They would not be able to.
It's only right in, right out. So right in means you have to be heading east on 72nd in order to turn right into the...
Right, so they would have to come in.
You can't turn left from the Woonarf to 72nd.
Okay.
Oh, so they could make the left in.
Okay, and then the last question I had was that setback in terms of height? You showed the height, if it's a distance away from the R1. Does the requirement specifically say distance from closest to R1 or single family? How's it worded?
I'd have to look. I can't think of any site that isn't single family that isn't R1.
The reason I ask is because that Bristol Court, they're actually R2, but they are essentially single family attached.
They're duplexes. So that requirement is only to an R1 property,
So you
a
think
single family home.
the requirement actually specifies R1 and did not include R2?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Carrie. All right, now we have the applicant, please.
Good evening, Dean DeVolis, DJ Architecture, 5009 Ridge Road, Edina, Minnesota. I have Ellie next to me I help guide the presentation, and the presentation is going to be basically in 5 parts. I'll quickly go through the past, which actually Carrie did a good job, where we were at the sketch plan review, then how we adapted to the to the Southdale group, which includes Mick Johnson and a group of citizens, the project itself, the features of the project in terms of the public component, and then using that 3D you saw from last time, we're going to do a pedestrian walkthrough. So the idea is how you experience at a pedestrian level to do it. So what we have here is the past renderings that you showed at sketch plan, which Carrie did a good job describing where we're at. So this is obviously the corner of 72nd in France, looking towards the southwest. And then the next one, I think I can run from my end, right? do I match it with? Carrie, is it this I'd match it with, or the?
Well, if you're on your computer, it would have to be yours.
All right. Excuse us 1 second. Outstanding. Okay, sorry. And then this is a view that you saw from the Woonerf before. So this is where we're at. So the next sheet shows how we sort of work. So this was Mick Johnson's original recommendations from the sketch plan review, which talked about the width of the Woonerf, and this mouse, let me get the right mouse, there we go. The width of the Woonerf recommendations, stepping the building, which you see here, which we started to accomplish, terrace and Donis area, 50 back foot France, 40 from 72nd, 30 to 40 from Gallagher, and Element. So this is where it began. And then about 2 weeks ago, we had the first set of recommendations, and about a week ago came the second set of recommendations. So we continued to evolve from there. And I'll walk through these graphics, and they have actually a lot of information, but this graphic that Mick down here talked about building materials. Red meaning primary stone, brick or tile, green meaning more metal panel, things like those type of materials, and then this blue I should say, and then green referring to glass, and 75% view, and finally this meaning restriction of garage doors, i.e. into the townhouses. So this was Mick's recommendation down here in the heights I worked with. This is where we evolved to, following most of Mick's recommendations, but adapted it to the architecture we have. So we really kept a majority of the stone, or really worked with that in more what I call the more intimate areas. More along France, which is more of a high visibility, we evolved a little more to a glass and metal type of facade within the design. And part of it's due to the architecture, which you'll see, because the France haven has a lot of cantilevers and movement to it, and doesn't work so well for brick. Brick doesn't cantilever so well, so we use materials that's more appropriate for that aspect. In terms of Mick's recommendation here, we hit this 100% in terms of his recommendation. This we evolved with the nature of the architecture, and you can sort of see the comparison. We've added more glass to the France for more transparency, and obviously say more stone in the back. We did adapt building masses. Red is what we subtracted to reduce the height. Blue is where we moved some mass to sort of keep our count. We actually came off original count of 318. We got down to 277 to make this work. So we increased mass here and here to Mick, but we didn't do a full 4 stories with 2 stories because we want to increase the tall mass closer to the neighborhood. So we generally follow the recommendations, but adapted a little bit to the architecture of the building. So this is a side-by-side comparison, which below is what I call the Southdale group. Above is our response to the process. And now we're going to the project itself. And I'm going to talk through several elements on the site plan. Some of the questions answered. I'll start with garage entries. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. The reason why we spread it around is, and we learned this, we did the Bridgewater corporate headquarters in St. Louis Park, which was a 87,000 square foot office building, which is on Monterey and Excelsior. There we did multiple garage entries and went through the traffic to spread the traffic out. Because the fear we had, if we grouped everything here and we got the right in, right out, which I give credit to Chad and Carrie for getting done with the county, which is a big deal and really helps enforce the South plan. We would have made this too tight and made this feel like an alley. So the thought is if you can spread traffic out to various points, it eases the density of cars and gives a little more separation. And the other reason, it allows a building to work in two halves. So if this was ever a separate development from this, the ramps could have some independent of function. So that's the basis for that. Access is mentioned, right in, right out. Full access here, right out only off the Woonorf, going west on 72nd, you could make a left in. So the thought is we want to sort of keep our traffic contained within our site. This element here I want to discuss, which is a redevelopment of 72nd. And this really came out of the second neighborhood meeting. One of the major issues was 72nd and its traffic. And it was pertaining to our project, other projects, it was a concern. There was really three camps that evolved. One was to close 72nd between Lamar Lane and the Wooner, just eliminate the street entirely. One was to limit access, and the third one was to leave it alone. We just want the full connection. We chose a middle road, which is keep connectivity, but change the nature of the street. And really that sort of follows what the Southdale plan is about, creating that connectivity and create connection. So the idea is what we're proposing is that this section of 72nd has the same architecture and development of the Woonorf. So it sells connectivity, but a street that has slower traffic, still has the connection, but changes the nature of it. So it's much more green, it's narrower, it slows the route of traffic with the idea that we can help change the nature of the street and restrict at least our traffic. It may help alleviate some of the additional traffic that just people coming to France Avenue from other areas of the other to get to other developments within the Southdale area. So the thought is to change the nature, and so when people see the street, it doesn't look like a straight concrete road through and easy access, but develops that effect on it. We are planning on the Wooner speed bumps, which is diagonals. There's a roundabout here, so we are doing traffic calming measures to do that. That is going to be incorporated, and that's going to be enhanced and developed as a crucial part of this plan and development. The public areas is what's all in green, including this upper plaza here. So when Carrie walked through the public zones, it's all this, and the grand stairs here, and this area inside the building. This part is private because it has a pool and component, so that's more secure for water safety. But everything you see outside of this area on the plan is public connectivity, public elements. They're really starting to build what we call the early framework of the South Area plan of creating these smaller blocks and zones within them that the public moves through. Granted, today it's only 2 blocks, but the hope is, as time goes on, as various parcels redevelop north and south, that this connectivity can grow and keep evolving on itself and start making further connections on it. So this is a little small, apologies, but this shows all the various floors of the building. The key thing that we did, I want to note, we took the parking and condensed it under the building entirely. So the building and parking garage align. Why that is important, it keeps all the parking below the building, which allows infiltration on the stormwater system all around it. So we've maximized natural earth on any area that was not built upon to really enhance the filtration system, stormwater development on it. It also allows for full-size trees and companion. And if you'll note this little piece right here, the townhouses are connected through an underground tunnel to them. So there's no garage connections at all, like a separate driveway. So it keeps the site very intense. And since I'm on this sheet, I'll just give you the basic breakdown as Carrie went through. There's 25 townhouses in this project. 10 of them will be ownership. There's 277 apartments, 30,000 square feet of retail, and 590 spaces of parking. So that's the basic components of the project. This is an aerial looking at it. The project will be energy efficient. It will have solar, and then actually all these will be solar too. We just hadn't drawn it all in. So it will have a solar because of its location. We know that the Petersons hopefully won't go tall. I don't think so by the zoning. This is a condominium that we believe that investment is protected, meaning we're not going to be shadowed out. And then the key is all this green, which really will help develop a sophisticated infiltration system for stormwater because we're lucky the site has sand, So we can do a lot of rain gardens, depression to handle it. We'll also have tanks because we have to deal with 100-year storm surges. So we have to have a dual system. But it works. As Carrie mentioned, this is the one part with lofted units. So I just want to clarify that. Then it steps down to what you call the 60 feet. And we did, like I say, rolled the building around all edges, extend the townhouses out to really make that stepping, then really develop this. And a hope is, and I know the Petersons, just suggest it, and we're willing to swap land, is that someday they develop a row of townhouses here that would help complete the Woonorf having townhouses on both sides to really enhance it. And if they're interested, we're willing to work with them on some partial land swaps that could make that possible. So that's the one piece there. So this is looking towards the north. Now this is looking from 72nd towards the south. And the idea that someday we hope this connection can weave between these parcels and this pedestrian connection keeps going. And the idea is this is tied in off the bike. So I didn't show on the plans is that we have a bike room dedicated in the center of both buildings, indoor heated bike area here, underneath here, and a bike storage area there. So, because the idea is you come off the greenway, the bikeway, there's a connection right here for people, and I hope they can park their bike, secure location, use antenna links, and so forth. So that's really part of it, because the idea of the regional bike trail is, runs right down Gallagher, and this hopefully becomes a spoke off of it that starts a connection. And then, as this shows, the idea of really greening up 72nd, green up this area, and then the idea of how the buildings rolled from the back and out transition from more of a stone to a little bit more contemporary facade along France. And again, this is ownership townhouses in this location. Next. So again, elevation from here, stone, going to more contemporary ideas of metal wood facade and the idea of eroding the building. This tall element was really a design decision, give a little bit variety in the roof heights. So it wasn't just all cut off at the same height, but there's some movement in the architecture to help scale it. And that was sort of a key idea of playing with this, where it meets the sky and creates interest. So it looks like a aggregation of similar pieces as opposed to one big development. So it has a lot of variety as you go around the block, a lot of changes of texture, material, looks, and aesthetics. And again, this is a view looking towards the northwest. Gallagher's down here. Again, the same idea of this change, stepping back the upper stories, a good variety, providing the, I think, 75% is what the South group talked about in terms of transparency. But again, because of and a lot of glass, but because of the nature of the cantilevers and stuff, this is more modern materials of metal, and then, like I say, it evolves more to a masonry look on the back. And again, close up by the idea, and this is a landscape plan in which we develop pockets of activity within us for outdoor dining along France, and I'll show that in the site plan that gives areas that people can gather. This landscaping obviously is going to be used for stormwater, but also it allows for the height difference so we keep full ADA access across all projects. Those diagonal ramps you see serve a dual purpose. One is to create connectivity, also to keep the ADA. This is looking north along the Woonorf. For sale townhouses here. This is a public plaza that I mentioned in the grand stairs. And the idea of this is start creating a variety of spaces. So everything's not just on the ground plane, but also areas where you can sit facing southwest for lunch, an area that may have what I call more passive lawn bowling elements up here. So you start developing a variety of spaces, conditions within it. And we did work with, auto, sidewalk, bike, doing some traffic segregation, but still allowing obviously some auto traffic work through here. So you have a hierarchy of uses and spaces start working the zone. So it gives a lot of rich variety that really enhances the pedestrian environment. And then again, this is a view of that public plaza on the north building, the stairs down, and the idea of trying to weave this public component so the project has like a variety and a lot of interactive spaces that occur within it. This is the street between the two buildings in which, again, between Carrie and Chad, we got our right in, right out. And the idea is that the street can have dual purposes. The idea is that these vooners could be used for food trucks or various festivals, things like that. So it carries more of a load than just a pedestrian space. It could be used for elements that are seasonal, whether it's a winter garden or a Christmas fair or things like that. It was designed to have that kind of ability and flexibility that enhances. So what I'm going to walk through is really what's the public components. I have 10 slides that really talk about the major part of it. The biggest one, first one is, this is what 72nd Street looks right now, which is, I'm just going to call it sort of a dreadful street environment as you come in off of this looking west, France being behind. And the idea that we want to really transform this part of the street to really change its nature, character. So while cars can still go through, it changes the nature, reduces the speed of traffic, hopefully reduces some of the cut-through traffic because it won't be as direct. And as I mentioned before, we're restricting our project to right and out so that our traffic doesn't contribute, but hopefully this overall development really changes the nature and provides a much greener environment by basically doing a pavement diet in this area and providing a lot more infiltration, greenery, which will do a lot of traffic calming and pedestrian environment that exists there. The next one is we're going to do 20% affordable housing. What this shows is that's going to be mixed throughout the project. We're not segregating into a separate building. Any unit is available to any person that qualifies. Right now we're looking at, and we're designing between 50 and 60% median income at 20% of the units. As Gary's mentioned, it's 60 some odd units, but what we're saying is it's anywhere in the project, and in addition, to keep this honest, we're going to provide the parking for the affordable units because there's sort of a way you can circumvent the affordable housing plan. Edina is provide the unit, charge for the parking. Thus, I could $200 for parking. I could make that gap disappear. So I'm going to say we're committed to providing the parking with the affordable units and no cost. So the affordability remains in the project, so it doesn't get basically circumvented out of it. Another element is we're wiping out blight. There's a lot of it. The 7200 building is under an ADA lawsuit due to it doesn't comply with the elevator and has its own structural issues. And the 7250, the pictures speak for itself. It needs to be retired. This sort of demonstrates why. Next, please. Underground parking. 100% of our parking is covered. Oops, went a little too quick. 100% of our parking is covered within the project, meaning, there it is, thank you. So the idea is that we could, and this is diagram, this is what we could pull off, but it really wouldn't do much good for what we're trying to do. And we're really making a point of taking that cost and putting all that parking 100% underground out of sight to make the green element, and then keep all that parking defined underneath the building so that all the green that's shown on here outside of what's inside the courtyards has that you do a natural filtration of stormwater. And you'll see we're really picking up a big stormwater element across the site on that aspect. Next, please. Oops, going backwards. And that's sort of a key piece. So if I want more here. There we go. This one is, wait, you missed one again, I think, Ellie. Okay, I'm not touching. I'm part of the problem. We don't have the graphic here. It's uploading, but let me explain. The trees, which this represents, hopefully upload in time, that we talked about, we're going to make that a conservation district to ensure it stays forever on that portion and not develop that. So imagine the red line here. That's where we're going to be because that really helps protect the homes on Bristol Court and actually provides a buffer further west on Hennepin. This would be the cheap way to do our stormwater. We can dig out the trees, use that low spot, and do a retention pond. But retention ponds generally, or detention pond, generally aren't that pretty. And I just pulled one off an example. So I thought if we let those trees stay right here, and do our system all through around here, we can preserve this, make a conservation district, and come up with a much more innovative stormwater management plan that uses natural soils to really accomplish by increasing the percentage of green on the site. But you can see on the right, the site is a high degree of hard pavement, and we're trying to get that increasing up. So this one, we're talking about, not only providing this, but we're also providing the green along France and Gallagher and developing it. So it's not just lawn, it's meant to be public space, landscape elements that really start enhancing the South Area plan and start pulling together. So the idea is it really, hopefully this project sets the first phase of the vision and sort of starts sending the direction. It's setting a bar that others can look at and build off of and start building that continuity with it. This basically shows this public plaza here is covering the parking in here. Again, the idea is that we're creating public space over the parking to increase a variety of spaces, conditions, gathering, lawn sports within the overall development, so it has a greater sense of place within the area on that. Now here's the stormwater. This is our site. Our catchment area, we're catching double what our site area is. So we get a 2-for-1 deal out of this, twice the stormwater for the price of one site. So what we've done is work linear systems through all this that works with natural infiltration, with rain gardens and storm traps in here, which has filtration within it. So the idea is that we're taking the water, sending it through naturally, what's really in the high storm events, capturing, let it filtration through, and then keeping this house through the conservation district. But you can sort of see the load we're picking up, and it goes off the map, is a lot of square footage that we need to handle. If we can handle that, we'll really reduce flooding potential and risk in this little section of Edina by really developing what I call a horizontal stormwater management system that can pick it up, as opposed to building one big pond here, which would be a lot less cheaper, but I think a lot less destructive on the area. So, and then finally, this talks about the public purpose versus what Kerry mentioned, what the zoning allows. I could put a building in the middle, park all the way around it, and I wouldn't have to show up at this meeting. I could just do it by right of the site. And so we really want to give that kind of deal, because what we're trying to do is really give, so you get for the density and work with the city in terms of finding TIF to really create a project that really goes beyond what the zoning is and really starts to set a pace setter for the community. And then solar. So the energy, we are going to do solar, and the energy thing, which I have packed in here, which I just got today, we will meet all those requirements, which you have in your packs. I won't review them because they're pretty well common sense, but we're going to really work in a lot of passive elements on top of it, especially in the solar because they have the roast, and in the stormwater management, and then the items that are listed in the documented procedures. So that's just going to be part of this project. Is that the last one? All right. So anyway, that concludes our presentation. So thank you very much. Oh, the fly-through. I forgot the last part. Yes, of course. Dummy me. I'll do this quickly, but the reason I want to do this is show it from a pedestrian perspective. That's one thing that is not shown. All I'm going to do is just walk around the project so you get a feel from it. Would be the eyes if you're walking down the sidewalks on 72nd France and the Vunorf and so forth. And you can see the project and the townhouse is stepping out, so forth, in the development and sort of the degree of green that's established. And I got a nice sunny day here and a lot of people pacing along comfortably. But it gives you an idea of the individual entrance of the townhouses, a commercial on the corner, and sort of looking up at that 60-foot line that we established that was mentioned. that you cannot see the story above, because these are true views, so this is what it'd be like outside going through the trees. And now we're on to France, and sort of the idea of the step backs, take it down a little bit. But the idea is that we're stepping those roofs to scale it. So from France, it has the look, and then we go more intense in that middle part because of the width of the street and nature of it, and just stroll down the street, zip along there. Again, the idea of the stepping, because the site has grades differences. This diagonal ramp you see there, we're going to use that to help with the ADA issue, so that's how I wove it in, so it looks natural within the site. Provide the connection, which is what the sidewalk is along France, and the buildings itself. On that aspect. This does show we're starting to work with the county. They're going to require a deacceleration lane, so you see that now as part of that right in, right out, similar to what you have at Lund's Barley's in that aspect. So that would be part of the project in that aspect. Here, zip around to the, just get us to the Gallagher, because we got a good feel of sort of the site. And then these green areas you see, those will be our depressions in certain areas that will be help with the stormwater management and so forth. This center street runs over the common garage, so this will not have any stormwater aspects to it because the garage runs underneath both buildings continuously in that aspect area. And again, the retail and the gathering spots on there. And then now we're at Gallagher heading west. And I'll take it down to Woonerf to get a feel for it. And again, the definition of corners, gathering areas, scaling of it, so forth, and amount of glass facing south to try to, with the shadow lines, again, to change the architecture and evolve it. Now, as you get around to the back, the area, we go more to a masonry step pattern, which starts working with the townhouses. And now we're on the Woonerf walking north. And again, the nature of the character changes where we have townhouses, individual entry, the building step, and these trees. What's good about the change of the garage design, now we can have full-size trees because this is over natural earth. So this greenery is legit. And you can see how the building steps and terraces. Why don't you take a peek up? Just in this, where I hope the Petersons follow through with townhouses at some date. And then the idea how it steps back with terraces and stuff. So the environment and nature of the backside changes, and then individual entries. And then continuing north. Again, the idea of the park itself, elements. We've added Spalding South and Edina right there in the middle. There's the idea that this Woonerf can contain art and have that kind of character. And again, sort of the idea, again, the townhouses creating the stepping and the scaling of the building, as you see right there. And the paneling and the idea of the steep bumps, just what you're saying. So use the bollards to help create definition for the cars, the darker stripes, development of speed bumps, so we slow the traffic. And then to the right is the grand stairs that goes up to their plaza. And then the townhouses step out deeper in this corner. As you can see, they jog out to increase the stepping and scale it more where it's single-family residential and townhouses. Where we left the mass back, pulled the townhouses out to narrow the Woonerf as Mick suggested, but not bring the whole building back. So we took the lower 2 stories back, but not then. That shows that up in the idea of that plaza and that connection. And just go down to the end of go back down to Woonerf. And then you can see the stepping, and that gives a little variety of shapes and spaces and creates interest on it. And the idea of these triangles, again, are part of the absorptive quality of the project and definition of space. So it's a lot of green, but can handle cars, but also separation of bikes and traffic, so you have sort of a coordination effect to it. So that now concludes the presentation, so thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'm going to open it up for questions. Do we have questions for the applicant? Go ahead, Lou.
So about the Woonor, I'm trying to, so that you're saying the gray areas are raised?
So the areas that we're going to incorporate subtle humps to slow traffic, and then where you saw Spalding South, that's an element to, as a roundabout, so you just can't zip straight through. So it'll be a small miniature roundabout at that point, plus the raised areas to really keep traffic at a slow pace and not make it a convenient cut-through, or some people expressed a frontage road to France Avenue. That's not the intent, but the idea to really make connectivity and define the small blocks.
Okay, and then, thank you. And then you showed, I don't know if you're building this or if it's just shown there, but a little bus stop or shelter.
That's a possibility working, we have to work with the county and Metro Transit, because they're the ones that award bus stops. So we hope we can develop a physical structure there that will provide some protection, because that's a rarity in Edina. We tend to have a T inside, but if we can start developing stuff like that, it will provide more, hopefully increased trans use and make it more comfortable to take the bus.
Right, yeah, I mean, usually we just have benches that have nothing there. But it is right on the, I mean, the one you show, again, it's apparently in the planning stages, but the one you show is literally right on the street, and that would be very uncomfortable, especially if the county wants a deceleration lane there. It means the main lane is going to be going pretty fast. So if there's any way that could be pulled back or something.
Yeah,
would be
and
nice.
we will. We just got in there's a graphic element,
Sure,
and we still need MTC to really negotiate with.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. So it sounded like you're saying you're going to be reconstructing 72nd?
We hope. This is where Chad, we got to talk with Chad, because this is an idea that came out of the second public meeting and something I thought to put forth. And we hope to look at and see if the city is interested in structuring TIF or something which could change the nature of the street. Because we think it would be important to really change, add more greenery, still provide connectivity, but slow traffic. So we hope that could be part of this project. But I'll see traffic, Chad has to review it, Carrie, in terms of its logic and sense, but I think it's something that could be a benefit all the way around.
Right, so that could also be, okay. Also, extra disturbance to the neighborhood, so. So Carrie, is that something then, do we need to address that at this point, or?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I haven't talked that through with Chad either.
Got it. Okay.
In terms of that right in, right out, that could be a condition where the developer would put that in.
Right. Okay, thank you. I know you're showing how with all the stormwater, it's all underneath. One of the things we're trying to do in Southdale is actually daylight some of that. Did you look at the potential to do that with your site plan at all?
Well, that was where we put in the conservation district. That part would be daylighted behind the townhouses to do that.
Okay.
So that's a part we'd maintain daylight to keep that natural environment. In these sections that are between the buildings, it's a little tight to make that work. But that's why I thought the best idea was if we can keep that grove of trees, which serves, that really helps provide a daylight opportunity. So that'd be part of the stormwater planning on it. But we are capturing rainwater from the roofs in the areas that are non-salt affected to use to maintain all the planning and landscaping you see in the project. So we're doing a segregation of stormwater, but we are looking at the conservation area as the daylighting portion of the stormwater plan.
So you would be building a stormwater pond within that?
We leave what's there. It's operating as one today.
Got it.
So the idea, let it do. The trees and species of plants have grown up to accept that environment.
Okay, so it's being maintained.
Yeah, we're going to let that do
Okay.
what it's done for the last couple of decades.
All right. So then again, about the Woonor, so it looks like you have a small roundabout, so cars can get around that?
Yeah, and if you look at an example of it, There's one, for example, up in, just off of 44th in Minneapolis. There's also one in the Phillips neighborhood, which is about this size that they're doing in various residential intersections that change traffic patterns. And they're 8-10 feet across. And there's two in city of Minneapolis I've studied. Actually, there's more than that, but two I looked up just to see how they performed. And they work within that environment. Except the difference is ours, we'd landscape the center of ours. Theirs right now is more of a curb and stuff in the middle. But yeah, it works just fine.
Okay. And then that public space that you have access from the Woonor, is there potential to provide access from France to that public space?
If we, depending, and I just give you the word depending, I can't do the grand stairs because I have the continuous, but how the tenants lay out in the retail, it may be something that comes through the building, and that's something we can look at once we get to that level, but it'd be more of a interior corridor type of connection as opposed to a set of grand stairs, but that could be a possibility.
Okay. That'd be nice to see. So you're also showing the sidewalk and the landscaping along France and along that deceleration lane. You were saying you couldn't put landscaping right up? It looked kind of barren. Were you saying that you can't?
We could, but here, why don't you, Ellie, spin me around to the front. So what we could do, now what I did is I kept the sidewalk straight and let the deal come to it. I could move the sidewalk in and keep a boulevard. It was just an option I did, because no matter where I put the green is, do I make a bigger green patch between the building and the sidewalk, or do I take the sidewalk and keep the boulevard running continuous? So it could work either way. On this, I just opted to work it this way to keep these green areas larger. But that could be a possibility, that this sidewalk here could cut deeper in, and this boulevard you see here could continue. So it's just a matter of how I play with the design on that section. If you feel like the pedestrian, and I see your point, if the pedestrian feels better protected, I could take this green that you see along the street and take it along and run it parallel to the deacceleration lane, and then reduce some of these green island rain gardens in that area.
And then just my last one, I know that you were defining or describing, because of the design of your buildings, why you couldn't meet the materials that we were recommending. And again, that's another real strong point that we're looking at with the Greater Southdale, is for these buildings to be kind of 100-year buildings, really, solid. And I guess I'd like to hear again why you couldn't meet some of Mick's recommendations.
And part of it is is you see these cantilevers, brick doesn't cantilever. So part of it's the nature of the architecture. But we have, these are still 100-year materials in terms of the metal, stucco, and stone. Sorry. So they're still first-rate quality materials. Like in St. Louis Park, they would consider these all Class 1 materials, for example. On there. So it's not really a quality like we're having less quality materials on the building. It's more due to architectural considerations because of the nature of design, that these large cantilevers can't really handle stone or masonry on that. And part of it was we wanted a little difference in facade varieties as you go from the Woonor to the front of the building, so the building sort of does a transition from a highly traveled, relatively high-speed France Avenue that's a very wide width and needs more what I call bold architectural gestures. And then as you curl around to the Woonor, which is a much smaller scale, that we go to more intimate materials like the stone and so forth. So part of it's architectural, part of it's the nature of the building design, and part of it was to give a variety of context to the building facades that they vary depending on the condition.
Thank you. Well, if there's no other questions, I guess we'll open it to the, did you have questions for the, okay. Go. Oh, did you do? Well, let Sue go first and we'll go.
Dean, thank you for that presentation. That was very thorough and very educational and very clear. So I just wanted to ask a question about the parking. Now, you had said that the idea was to sort of spread around the parking. But I also realized that then really you have to utilize then the Wunarf for automobiles, because now you're putting an access for the townhome parking on that side off the Wunarf.
Correct, through the common garage.
Okay.
So the townhouses, when you enter the townhouses, you enter the major garage, and there's a tunnel underneath the Wunarf that goes into the garage of the townhouse. So the idea is that instead of the townhouse as having individual garage doors or so on access, it's through the common garage to preserve the green space, because we didn't want a ramp down sitting against the conservation district, nor do we want to introduce garages off the Wunarf. So basically, we've kept access off the Wunarf as one garage, and that's it. And then the other two are off the street that runs between the two buildings to France. So really limited in terms of amount of traffic on there. But we, like I said, I wanted to spread that out.
Yep. Would it be possible to have eliminate that entrance? I know this goes against your idea of spreading it out, but if you did actually just retain only the entry points off of France, can you still access the townhome?
Yes,
parking?
it still go through the underground garage.
It still connects.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I guess what I'm getting at is I'm still unsure about mixing the cars with the pedestrians. In some sense, it feels a little bit like there might be encouragement of automobile traffic, even traffic that's not just for these buildings as a cut through. That's just one comment. But I wanted to understand your traffic assumptions. So you feel that if there's only one entrance into the parking off of France, that would back up, or
Exactly, and where I'm pulling that from, because I had a good precedent to work from, was the Bridgewater Bank, which is on Monterey and Excelsior, and it has a large garage, and we split the entrances in actually 5 different locations to spread it out. And that really was very comfortable with the city, because you took the intensity of traffic, or if I put it off Gallagher, off Excelsior, and spread it, it diffused it. That traffic became really minimal because it provided a lot of different ways out. And that's what I was sort of hoping the same idea here is that the multi-owners just spread it, the garage is sectioned so that you're not dumping a whole bunch of traffic between the buildings and potentially cause a backup off of France, but you spread it out a little bit to ease it. And if the Wunarf's designed right, there's nothing wrong with having some cars mix with the pedestrians, because the reality is I'm sort of a fan of allowing them mix, because people experience a neighborhood first by a car, especially in Edina, because they're not a true pedestrian city. If they like what they see, they'll park and experience it. So I didn't want to say no cars, because I saw what they did downtown Hopkins, for example, where they took out the cars entirely, and the main street became very quiet, because the cars, if the cars are managed, obviously too many cars, are cars managed, they add a sense of activity, interconnectivity, and if more cars go electric, they become less offensive over time. So I wanted a mix of that, so people who have some action and spread the traffic out, because I think if you go no cars, it becomes a little too quiet, and less people get a chance to experience the space and have a feel for it. So that was the logic of why the mix, you may say, hopefully our mix is 30% cars, 20% bikes, and 50% pedestrians. You hope to sort of provide a ratio of a nice shared street that keeps the connectivity in the Southdale area.
Thanks.
Hi, I was wondering whether there'd be any electric vehicle charging stations included in the garage.
Let me find this, because in the energy, I'm going to go through this real quick, because your question's dead on to what, and this is, Edina's has added a personnel for conservation just here. I can pull this out. Let me find the list, because I'm going to run through it real quick. I clipped it in here. So hang on a second. So here's the sustainability. So basically, and you have it right here, but we will have sustainable design and energy design assistance. We will have renewable energy. We will have electric vehicle infrastructure within the project. So we are going to do that for sure on that, definitely. And we may come up with a ratio that provides some outlets immediately and provides wiring for future outlets. And we'll do it both in the residential level of the parking and the commercial level on that aspect. We will do the Energy Star for both the businesses, and we'll be looking at organic recycling. So yeah, we'll be following these guidelines and actually going above them in a lot of different areas.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Just real quick, if I could, there are lots of pieces for this project that are, as much as you have exposed, there are still some that are hidden that bring benefit to the community. The solar panels, I think from some certain angles, you'll be able to see them from lots of places. People won't know that they're there. The stormwater, again, much of it, the infiltration basins for it are so incorporated into the planters that you don't see them. So the request would be that you set up at least some of the panels so that people can see that they are there and are aware that they're there. Do the same thing perhaps with the stormwater so that instead perhaps it's not a gigantic feature, but some water exists so that people can understand this is what's going on here. This is the direction that the world is going and that the city is encouraging developments to go. First, kudos for doing it, but second, you should get the credit for it. And it's more than that. It's an educational feature so that people understand and take home with them that these are possibilities that they can do too.
No, thank you. There is one project, when you mentioned it, comes to mind that you actually looked at, which is you were doing a waterworks building on Southdale in which they were going to sort of advertise their elements and incorporate into building design as features. I think that's a good idea because what I admired about that first design was that they were making obvious what they were trying to do. I agree with you thinking that we should, either through the demonstration or educational elements along the Woodnorth, really describe how this project accomplished it. So I agree with that thought. And I'd like to say your review of the Planning Commission's review of that project, you remind me of that. So I think that's a good thought. Thank you.
Great, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll open up for the public hearing. And, sorry, something happened. Anyway, so opening up to the public. So you can use either one of the podiums when you come up. And as was explained earlier, you'll get 3 minutes to speak, so you'll see a green light and then it'll turn red. We know a lot of people want to speak, and so what we ask is if, comment has been made, try not to keep repeating that. We want to just hear new comments, so we're just, but go ahead and start and come up. Hi.
Hi, good evening, Chair Olson and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Hope Melton. I live at 4825 Valley View Road in Edina. I'm also coordinator of Edina Neighbors for Affordable Housing. I urge you to approve the comprehensive plan amendment, preliminary rezoning, and preliminary development plan for 7200 and 7250 France Avenue. My primary concern is that Edina has an urgent need for more affordable housing. We've priced out our seniors when they want to downsize and stay in the community, our community and school staff, the children of current residents, the workforce of our local businesses, and we have no way of meeting our affordable housing goals unless we provide greater height and density allowances in areas like this. The Metro Council forecast for new affordable housing by the year 2030 is 878 units, and these 62 units go a long way to getting us there. Let's see. That these units are not segregated but integrated throughout the building is a very significant plus, in my opinion. Second, this is an ideal location for affordable housing because the greater Southdale area planning already has and envisions the increased density and building heights required for affordable housing. Third, affordable housing needs to be located near public transit and arterial roadways, and that's the case here. And finally, its pedestrian-oriented development, the additional public space and public realm, the provision of more green space, and the proximity to low-density uses makes it an ideal location for life cycle affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi. Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Manish Vermani, and I live at 7312 Gloucester Drive, Edina. I've been living there for about 10 years now. I do appreciate the city's plan to modernize the city. I don't want to call it redevelopment, it's modernizing. It's great. We should do it. We should have retail. We should have more restaurants and things like that, no doubt about that. I do have some concerns, though. The studies that have been done, especially the traffic studies, have conveniently missed the impact of the neighborhood. They cover really small portions. They look at intersections. If, as a person who lives over there, I see traffic that goes on 72nd Street. People go on that street because they want to go and get to 100, Highway 100. That's the easiest way to get there. So if you increase the density of people over there in that particular development, you're going to see a lot of people going on 72nd in front of Cornelia onto 70th Street to Highway 100. That's the easiest way. Otherwise, you have to take 5 stoplights on France Avenue and then cut across 62. It's very painful to do that. A lot of people do this. The increase in traffic was shown to be 15%. I think it could be a lot larger than that. It's interesting that none of the data that was presented did not provide any confidence limits on the statistical data. It's just, there's statistical analysis. It needs to have confidence limits. It didn't really show that. I was kind of confused about the logic of the architect here, suggesting greening up 72nd somehow leading to lower, reduced traffic. I don't get that. That's a concern. Overall, if you have increased traffic on the 72nd Street, there are a few concerns there that happen. First of all, like I said, people go on 72nd, go up on Cornelia, and then they go west on 70th Street. Cornelia Elementary, again, you have a school zone, lots of traffic already, a lot of cars parked already in front of the school. It's already very congested. In that neighborhood, the 3 blocks that were shown, there's at least 50 toddlers or infants that I'm personally aware of that live over there that I'm connected to. Their parents are all out in the evenings with the strollers, with the bikes, and on the weekends they're playing on these streets. It's going to increase the risk and increase concerns for the safety of pedestrians over there in that area. That's really concerning, especially now with the retail, with restaurants. Like it or not, there's going to be increased level of drinking and driving, texting and driving in a residential neighborhood. You don't want increased traffic through residential neighborhoods for that purpose. And this will definitely increase the residential traffic. Parking overflow is a concern. This building's going to be there for 100 years. Is that what you're planning for? Then 30 years from now, when there's increased traffic, where does the parking go? Today, if you go on Linmar towards Hazelton, in the mornings when I go to the office, lots of times there's so many cars, there's room for 1 car to go. And it's very dangerous because some of the people who don't usually drive around know how to drive around there. They come really fast swerving from Linmar to Hazelton. It's very, very risky. I also found strange that, adding the extra garage entrance in the moonroof wouldn't really add that many cars, but it will somehow alleviate the pressure of the other 2 entrances. I don't get that. If it takes off the traffic from there, it brings it over here. I see the red light. The last thing I'm going to say is, as a responsible parent, I'm really concerned about increased traffic around that area where there's so many kids. It is growing. It's bringing a lot of new families with young kids there. And I object to the increased density of the project, not completely opposed to the project. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening, Chair Olson and fellow commissioners. My name is Steve Brown. My address is 7205 Bristol Circle, directly behind the property. My involvement in the city of Edina, I've been a resident here for 51 years. 26 of those has been in the Cornelia neighborhood, and the last 11 has been in my home, which is directly adjacent to the site. I'm going to point, this is my property right here, which is directly adjacent on my eastern edge. So if there's anybody who is directly impacted by this, it would be me. I've been a planning commissioner in the city of Edina for 11 years. I chaired the greater Southdale area 70th Street SAC a while back, which basically reduced the traffic along 70th. And I've been part of the greater Southdale area planning. And the reason I bring that up is I've been very familiar about the activities that have been talked about in this area. And I stand here appreciative to Dean DeVolis and the developer for a great job of acknowledging a variety of components of which I support this project. First and foremost, the alternative. I, as a profession, am a commercial real estate consultant specializing in healthcare. Knowing the permitted use that currently exists and the potential risk of traffic into the neighborhood, which would be much more severe, this project is bringing residents and people who are going to be part of that community into the site, and I support that. It has 20% affordable housing, which has been a huge issue in some of the other developments that we've dealt with. And I think first and foremost, which has been a huge issue, is the protection and the creation of this conservation easement, which is the buffer directly to the east of my current home. And I received a flyer in the attention Cornelia neighbors, which basically had a sentence that said, the project will critically impact the residential character of our neighborhood. And I respectfully disagree with that comment completely, because that buffer of trees, this project essentially from the neighborhood will be not visible. And Mick has done sightline studies and done perspectives showing the view from the Cornelia School and along 72nd. And by preserving those trees and creating a conservation easement, it's assured that there's a buffer, a natural buffer, that will protect the neighborhood and the value of those homes as this new development occurs. Additionally, because of the design changes that they've made to incorporate the townhouses, we've got a very strong transition from height to the residential neighborhood, which has been a core component in planning along along France Avenue since I was on the Planning Commission years ago. So from a standpoint of where I stand, and I'll be making the same commentary to the City Council, I strongly and heartily endorse this project and applaud the developer and the architect for the work they've done to address the neighbors' concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Arnie Bigby. I live at 7621 Edinburgh Way, and I just want to remind the city of the beauty of the Edinburgh townhomes, also the Centennial Lakes townhomes. And these communities, if you were to come there, visit me, and walk through our courtyards, I think you have the same kind of flavor. There aren't cars going through those courtyard areas, but if you've been to Centennial Lakes, you know what it's like for the people who live there in the townhomes. Is it a dense housing arrangement? Yes. Does it cause increased dangerous traffic? No. I'm just convinced that people who live in an area drive sensibly and reasonably, and that we probably don't have as much texting and other kinds of things going on in the residential areas as we do on some of the highways. So I would just be very much in favor of this, and I think the big bonus is that we finally get a start on the affordable housing that we have been neglecting for so long. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Erin Brum, and I live at 4208 Mavel Drive, very near to this project, and I'm going to be super brief because it's a work night. And I'm having deja vu because I remember standing here talking about another project very near to our house the Estelle project. And I'm finding myself standing here again and questioning, I guess it's a rhetorical question, but questioning why we're talking about buildings that don't meet the comp plan that everyone talks about. And it's just incredibly frustrating to keep coming to these meetings. And then on top of these meetings, we have community meetings to talk about these buildings. And I don't understand why we keep having these over and over again. And what is the point of having a comp plan if developers can just keep coming in with all of these buildings? And it's a beautiful building. I mean, you did a fantastic job. But it's just, you know, for the neighbors that live there, we don't want more traffic. Everything that he said about traffic is absolutely spot on. We have kids that live right by the school. Cars are zipping in and out. It's very, very dangerous. And what you're talking about adding makes it a lot worse. So for the neighbors that live in Cornelia, and I think I speak for a lot of them, the building looks great. Everybody knows what's there right now is a total eyesore. I mean, it's really bad on a good day, but it's not right to put 800 units on top of us. And just my personal feeling too, I don't think you should discount people that live in duplex housing because they're our neighbors too, and that's important. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Sam Sturm. I've been a resident at 7121 Bristol Boulevard, which is in very close proximity to this project. It's actually a property that you can see in the background of most of these pictures. I'm a teacher in Southwest High School. I teach math. I think there's a perception that this neighborhood's only for super rich people, but there are teachers and other public servants who live in this area. I think one thing that's been overlooked, since we aren't supposed to repeat what others have talked about, is not what the project looks like. We can see that in these pictures. What's it going to sound like? That's harder to see in the pictures. You have traffic that's driving about 50 miles per hour along France Avenue. We're planning to have residents live right on top of that with a walkable street where there's food trucks. But it's going to be really hard to have a conversation with people with traffic driving by in such close proximity. Also, this is a tall building, 5, 6 stories. It's going to have major shade effects on the north side throughout the day, and on the east side in the afternoon when there's going to be a lot of people shopping at those businesses. So that green area next to France Avenue, it's going to be in the shade. It's going to be really loud with traffic. It's not going to be a very pleasant place to lounge or walk by as you shop or go to the restaurants. It's not a good outdoor place, in my opinion. It's hard for me to have a conversation when I am on 72nd walking towards France. I can hear the traffic from France from where I live, and this development's going to be a lot closer to France than where I live even. So that's something to keep in mind. It looks pretty, but it's not going to be as pleasant of a lifestyle as what it looks like. Okay.
Thank you.
I have a point of order. The question is, I have a friend here who would like to speak but is very sick, and she has prepared her statement and would like me to read it. However, I would also like to speak, so I would like to be able to read this. May I do that?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Roseanne Anderson. I'm one of the people within 1,000 feet, and I am reading this statement on behalf of Kathy Campbell, who lives in the Bristol Circle. Pardon? My address is 7204 Bristol Circle. Roseanne and Steve Anderson, and Kathy and Bruce Campbell live at 7201 Bristol Circle. Anyway, and do you have enough information for that? Okay, so on behalf of Kathy Campbell, I am making one last plea to stop the current proposal for the 7200, 7250 site. I want to shame all of you planning commissioners for trying to shoehorn this behemoth of a development into these 2 lots. You have known from first blush that it did not fit the site with respect to the comprehensive plan, and yes, we know you can fix that and that it would significantly detract from the residential character of the neighborhood. Especially shame on you, Kevin Stoughton, who met with Cornelia neighbors before you were elected. You knew we clearly opposed the height, density, and street proximity from the time it was first introduced. And you, Mr. Mayor, have been personally determined to turn this residential boundary into a district with this same mismatched developer while this mismatched developer repeatedly drags his offerings through the system. You have caused so many of us fear for what our elected representatives are planning next for us. We value our homes, schools, streets, and green space. This is a quality of life issue, and you can do better for us. And thank you for indulging us with the opportunity to present that statement to you. And now, let's go. Now, my comment, and I will try to present a twist on the traffic issue for you. Obviously, I live in the neighborhood. I have lived there for 20 years, give or take, since 1993, I think. And my comment is this: what Mr. DeVolis said in one sentence, I wish you could go back to and think about, and that is he looked at 3 options for traffic as it enters onto 72nd Street from the development and how 72nd Street is used today. So what I am suggesting, and I feel very, very strongly about it, and I am extremely serious about it, that as a condition of whatever is developed, I know there's tremendous opposition to any development, or development that violates the comprehensive plan. But what I am asking is that this group not only consider business development, but community development, and stop and block 72nd off, so that this development would allow the new residents of this project to enter onto 72nd and turn right to go to France. None of us can turn left to go on France anyway, and block off 72nd such that this is no longer a pass-through street. We protect the integrity of the neighborhood. We allow for the access to and from this development using 72nd for these people, but we are not complicating the roadway itself. That's all I can say. I'm sure my time will run out in a second. I do think that there are people on the council who have a passion for this idea. I do not think it is outlandish. I also do not think it's Mr. DeVolis who has the responsibility to deal with the street. I don't know enough about that. But I guess I would ask that that is a consideration as you look at the development of this area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Paul Hughes. I live at 7208 Bristol Circle, and Roseanne and I are neighbors. I always deal with people and deal with situations on a couple of basic premises, and that is, what's the intention, what's the motivation? Here's my surmising. Number one, my sense is that the intention as it relates to the developer is all about making money. The intention perhaps for the city of Edina is a new tax base of which they can collect money. For those of us who live in the neighborhood, it's the quality of life. We've been there for 38 years. We've enjoyed it. We've raised our children there. We now invite our grandchildren there. One of the things that is also, in my mind, very important is that we all live by a combination of standards, values, principles, and laws. What is frustrating to me that the younger lady spoke about a couple of minutes ago, and that would eliminate a lot of stress for those that live in that neighborhood, is that I'm constantly amazed that either the Planning Commission or the City Council is able to hear or receive proposals from developers when the first part of the development proposal is, what concessions can you make on the codes? The codes are the standards. They make life meaningful for us. And when you keep screwing around with the standards, you screw around with the quality of our life. That, to me, is very, very important. So as it relates to the commission in relation to the job that you're going to do, I hope you'll give consideration to a couple of basics. I loved what they put up on the screen. Build it 4 stories tall, Don't change the density, you got my vote. Mess with those things, I'm opposed to it. Thank you.
Is anyone else?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, my name is Bill Griffith, 8300 Norman Center Drive, representing the Petersons who are here this evening. I believe you'll hear from Mark Peterson in a moment. I simply want to comment on the traffic and say that as between several iterations of a plan, first on 7200, now both 7200 and 7250, this solves the major concern, which is the connectivity. And with all due respect to the prior speaker, cities are spending millions of dollars to reconnect streets that were closed. It's called, I believe the concept is complete streets. And so the idea that we would now start closing off streets or reducing connectivity or reducing access doesn't help not only the public, but the neighborhood either, because it bottles up neighborhoods. All you have to do is drive through South Minneapolis, where they try to accommodate neighbors, and you get stuck in South Minneapolis because you can't find your way out. For the Petersons, the primary concern was a prior plan that showed all of the access on Gallagher and no consideration for what would happen in the future on the next parcel. Today we have a development with two parcels showing complete streets, connection on both ends, north and south, and that very critical right in, right out connection on France Avenue. Now, I've heard variously tonight that it's been approved or it will be approved or there's a process ahead. I think what's critical for the approval of this project is that it will be approved, that it's part of the project, because it's absolutely essential. And as we heard this evening from the traffic engineer, it will relieve traffic on 72nd Street. So both Gallagher and 72nd Street. So the Petersons have been concerned about the project, heightened density, but they've mainly been concerned about that principal issue of connectivity, access, and dispersing the traffic. And so for that reason, the plan is greatly evolved. And I'll let Mark Peterson address the other issues. Thank you.
Might as well do now. Good evening, commission members and everybody else. My name is Mark Peterson, and I live at 7330 Gallagher Drive. And I also own 4 homes on Gloucester that are they're twin homes, not duplexes, just so you know. Anyway, you know, really, I agree with you guys have done a lot of good work to make this a more palatable development for us, and we are just directly west of this site. So the couple comments that I want to make are that basically, you know, at Cedars, Edina, we have 600 apartments on 21 acres. That's the density of about 28 units an acre. And it's crowded, right? It's like you're in a little town in there in a certain way, especially when everyone's home and all that kind of stuff. And when I think about 300 units and 30,000 square feet on 5 acres, that's going to feel like the new East Downtown area to me. That's going to be quite urban, and you add to it kind of the size of the building on the smallness of the lot, and it just seems like if you looked at Mick Johnson's August 9th notes, where he's saying essentially the the setbacks are not deep enough to keep the architecture from dominating the neighborhood experience at the street level. You know, what we really like about that neighborhood is that it really feels like a neighborhood, and it doesn't feel like you're in downtown or you're in, you know, a real urban district. And this looks like, to me, it looks like it's too large for the site overall. And that density, that's very dense. I mean, you're in my world, you're kind of pushing it for Edina. Anyway, the other things I wanted to say real quick are, just consider that, you know, that's a lot of units on 5 acres. Okay, so then Dean is saying that he can't have the stone wrap around at ground level. That doesn't really, I could be wrong, I'm not an architect, I can't say that, but it looks like you could have some, you know, a real nice facade on the ground floor at least, so the people that are walking by aren't walking by steel and glass and plaster, something that's a warmer material. And my last comment is, where's the 75-foot tower going to go? You know what I mean? For the antennas. I've got about 15, 20 apartments right there. I don't know, 75-foot tower just makes me a little nervous sitting right there. Obviously, we're going to live through all the construction. You know, we're not opposed to developing the site, and we'd like a development, of course, that really works for the whole neighborhood. And that's my comments. Thank you.
Cool. There you go.
Use the overhead.
I think that's better. Good. My name is Bruce McCarthy. I live at 6708 Point Drive. I'd like to see the Planning Commission follow the established planning process. The height and density proposed for this project is not supported by the zoning. It's not supported by the comp plan. It's not consistent with the Edina Vision 2015. The justification for this project came ostensibly because it was consistent with the contemplations of the Southdale Work Group. And those contemplations have swung back and forth over the years, sometimes low in the beginning and then very high and now low again. And what we learned from Carrie tonight is that they're not consistent with the Southdale Work Group principles anymore, or their contemplations, I should say. You know, I understand the work group's ideas will evolve and change over time, and that's why I think it's premature to jump in and set a precedent until the process has been completed. The graphic that you see on the screen, that's from the city's website and describes that process. In it, you can see that the ideas are built up over time with input from residents. Then it's commented on by the Planning Commission, then vetted and approved or modified by our elected city council. The city has set up this process, a very orderly procedure to consider all viewpoints and carefully choose a path of future development for our city. These proposals, they want to jump over that process. They want to do sort of a one-off and say, hey, forget that whole process. We're going to go down this different path. And I think that's a problem for us. I think it will lead to a bad precedent for us. And I think it sort of erodes the trust in the city in the process of getting resident input on these things. The developer says we have to do something because the buildings are in terrible shape, and they are in terrible shape. I've driven in that parking structure. They're terrible. That didn't happen yesterday. That's been present for a decade or more. And sometimes I even hear the city leaders saying, oh, we've got to do something because of that problem. I think we have to be strong here. I think we have a process. We should figure out what we want in this area, and then I think we should insist on that. We shouldn't let them use that as sort of a club over our heads. Some commissioners might say, oh, but I like this, or I like height, or I know better than others, what's right for the city. I'd say, all of that might be true, but let the process work. I think the city has set up a good process. I think it's time to let it work through. I don't think we should set a precedent here, particularly since the original justification that this was consistent with the Southdale Work Group is not true anymore. It's 60 feet is what they're contemplating now, and this project is for 86. So I say take time, avoid a rush to judgment, take time to look at the bigger picture, and please follow the process. I think it's good for the city. I think it'd be good for all of us. Thank you.
Yeah, no more clapping, okay? We're just going to keep it to the public. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Mark Mitchell. I'm a resident at 7001 Heatherton Trail. Briefly, I side with the last several neighbors that have expressed their concerns, so I won't go over that. But I will say there was a real success about 11 years ago affecting 70th Street, where I thought the neighborhood in the city really came together in a very creative way because we were concerned that the traffic between Highway 100 and Southdale was just going to It was just going to be the cutoff that was going to boost the traffic, and traffic is a real concern. But there was some creative thought process that went in there, some good dialogue, and we put in a circle, or the city did, wound up putting in a circle at, I believe it's Bristol in 70th Street, which significantly slowed down the traffic. They also made it a bike-friendly path, and they beautified along the way. So I think there's some things that can be done, because right now the traffic on 72nd is of concern. It really, truly is. One thing I would like to point out is that between the intersection right now between Cornelia Drive and 72nd all the way out to France Avenue is from Cornelia Drive to Gallagher to Heatherton Trail to Bristol to one more, and then eventually out to it's a drag strip going east or west. There's nothing slowing down that traffic right now. So I don't really know what's going to come out of it. There's some really great concepts. Hats off to you. There's some really good creative thinking, and I want to acknowledge that. And as part of the creative spirit, can we look at possibly whatever comes out of this, because those are some junk buildings right now, and population density obviously is a concern. But is there a way to slow down the drag strip on 72nd, no matter what comes of this thing? Could it be a circle at the would be the northwest corner of this development? I don't know. I don't want to encroach on neighbors' land. It's an issue, but I think some things can be done. Narrow it, make bike lanes, do something to, because once you hit the gas pedal, you're gone. And somebody already mentioned that that's a direct access to Highway 100. So you go down, you're going west on 72nd as fast as you can. You come to a stop, you turn north on Cornelia, and that's another one. From 72nd and Cornelia all the way to 70th is a very long stretch, and there is no stop sign except for a voluntary do not mow down pedestrians at Cornelia School. Thanks for listening to me. Best of luck.
Good evening. My name is Nora Davis, and I live at 6921 Southdale Road. And I really couldn't sit through this hearing without having something to say. I have to laugh every time I hear a traffic study. Have they ever said, no, this isn't a good idea? It's never an issue. Never, ever, ever. I saw it at 6800. Traffic isn't an issue. It is an issue. So I think these folks that do traffic studies have a good deal. All they have to do is say, yes, everything is fine, and they get paid, and off we go. I have another comment, and that's about the building itself. Every time I see a development presentation, the buildings are beautiful. And they have all these trees, and there's nothing around them, and everything is beautiful until they're built. I don't know if you've been past Avador on Eden Avenue. The original renderings were beautiful. There were trees in front and trees all the way around. If you go down Eden Avenue today, well, you can't because they've closed the road. But Avador is right on the sidewalk, and it would be terrifying to walk along Eden, to go in and out of Avador. And I don't know how people are going to access anything at Avador. They're talking about the possibility of a tunnel to get people across Eden Avenue. But it's right there in your face. And you talk about going down a tunnel, that's Avador. And I don't know where they're going to put any trees, those beautiful trees that were in the renderings. My only thought was perhaps they're just going to paint them on the front of the building. It is just one of those buildings that looks like it's been shoehorned into that site. And let me tell you, it was one massive shoehorn that got that building in. So please drive by and think about how a building looks when it's built. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Carlson. I live at 4433 Ellsworth Drive. I also am not in favor of this project. The height of 86.6 is too high. The density is way too great. Together, they do detract from the neighborhoods. A comp plan needs to be followed. The west side of France Avenue between Gallagher and 69th is a critical transition zone. And I just ask that you carefully wonder about this project, because as you look at this one, it can apply to all the other sites along France Avenue. 69th to Gallagher needs to have special consideration as far as the comp plan is concerned. If you look at this nice publication that the city hands out, you've probably seen it. It's a map of all the construction projects that are there. What is the largest project that is proposed for Edina? It's this one. No other project has as many rental units as this one does. This project is just massive in size. I encourage you to go on 66th Street and walk by the Best Buy site where they're putting up this project that's there. Look what a massive project close to the road looks like. I don't think that's a mistake we want to make in Edina. A couple other items that I would like to mention. If you go by the Aurora building, walk along France, just listen to the noise. That's tough. A building built this close to France is subject to huge noise problems. The renderings that the architect put up really are very fancy, very good. I've never seen France with only 2 cars on it, though. You know, the traffic there is big time. 72nd Street, if you close that off, you're going to take about 3 years off my life. I cannot live going down 70th and 66th Street to get over to the rest of the part of the community. 72nd Street right now is a lifeline for those of us that live buried deep in the South Cornelia neighborhood. The promenade, I worry about that. I would not want my children and I would not want my grandchildren playing on the promenade. There are no cars on the Centennial Lakes promenade, so why do you think we need cars on this one? We're looking possibly at a promenade that extends all the way up through Valley View. But before we jump on the first section of it, don't we need to do a long-term plan or vision as to how this is going to be put together? Or are we going to end up with a one-block promenade that doesn't fulfill its value throughout its life? Thank you very much.
I'm going to try something a little different and go to this side. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Jenna Alden, and I live at 4417 Ellsworth Drive. I do not agree with the proposal that has been presented. I moved from South Minneapolis, off Excelsior, over by Lake Calhoun, about a year and a half ago. I moved away from retail and restaurants and density to backyards and an elementary school that I can walk to with my husband and our little boy, who you heard squawking in the hallway earlier this evening. They have since gone home for bath time and bedtime. The proposal concerns me for several reasons. First of all, as has been mentioned, but I think it's worth focusing on, this is a double ask. It's not just a request for additional density, it's a request for a rezoning away from office and medical to residential, retail, and restaurant. And then the double occupancy request to go from 30 units per acre to 60 is double, and I think using the senior center precedent of nearby having 80 per acre seems a poor analog to a food truck festival, Woonarf. The traffic study, again, people have mentioned, but I think it's worth reiterating that they reference quantity, but haven't talked about quality. And there's a difference between people who are stopping in and out through the day for an appointment or an office or small retail, and people coming home at the end of the day. In particular, that puts a lot more bodies into the neighborhood. And when people are looking for recreation, they want to drive around, they want to walk around in the evenings, they're likely not going to go across France. They're going to go into the neighborhoods. They're going to go into Cornelia Elementary area, which is like 4 blocks from this proposed site. And the traffic on 72nd is also a concern. The right in, right out means that unless there is some sort of stoppage, any traffic that wants to turn right into that establishment will have to come down 72nd. So it's probably off 100, down 70th, past Cornelia Elementary School, and into this establishment. And then if the Woonarf goes all the way through, you're connecting Gallagher and all of the Cedars of Edina and a whole bunch of other residents as well. So you're going to increase, I think, traffic quite a bit. The affordable housing goals, I think, are fantastic and important to Edina, but with the 2 added corners of Southdale, the residences over by Byerly's, the Guitar Center, it shouldn't fall on this proposal alone to get us towards the 800 that we're aiming for by 2030, which is 12 years away. And finally, I just want to say that this is being called a public improvement proposal, and there are a lot of great things about the proposal that's been brought forward, but none of them seem like they are for the community. They seem like they're going to benefit, I don't know, different people, new people who want to move in, but not the families who have chosen that neighborhood in Edina, that location where I can walk my son to school, because I wanted something that was away from density and retail and restaurants, and I wanted a family neighborhood where I could safely walk around and not worry about tons of traffic. So I wonder if we could consider how we might improve the site within the current zoning, or at least consider the residents and families that are currently there and who consider Edina at this stage in their family and life. Thank you. Thanks.
Use the mic. Yeah.
Good evening. I'm Sandy Carlson, live at 4433 Ellsworth Drive. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I do not support this project. I believe there has been a tremendous amount of consternation over the years over these proposals, which is evident that this is not the right project for this site, given all of the consternation and the denials that have occurred to date. There are somewhere between 500 and 750 acres in the greater Southdale area. There's a lot of land where apartments can be built that make a lot more sense than being in a transition area to a residential neighborhood. So I think that there's plenty of opportunity to build. The other points that I would like to make is there is not enough parking in this project. And I know the traffic study says, or the traffic people say there's plenty of parking. It's supposed to have 686 spaces. There's 590 parking spaces. That's 96 spaces less than what is required by code. And we need to implement code. If there's not enough parking in this, then it's going to spill out onto 72nd Street and Gallagher, neither of which streets can handle parking. So I think the parking is a significant issue with this proposal. the right-in, right-out curb cut. I spoke with the Hennepin County Transportation Division people today, and they said this is still under discussion. That it's possible to get the curb cut, but there has been no final decision that they know of. And one point they made is they are trying to eliminate as many access points on France as possible because they see it as a problem area and it creates more accidents. And also the curb cut is not a pedestrian-friendly environment, which is one of the things we are wanting to create. So I don't think that that's helpful. I'd also like to point out the Edina code and the items the Planning Commission is required to address regarding proposals. This comes from the code, and the Commission may recommend approval by the Council based upon but not limited to the following factors. So these have to be considered. One, is it consistent with the comprehensive plan? The answer is no. Two, will it not be detrimental to properties surrounding the track? I think there's been a lot of people who have said that they view it as being very detrimental. The density is too much, the height is too much, it's the wrong project for the area. Three, will it not result in an overly intensive land use? Yes, it will. Mark Peterson from the Cedars has made that point. It doubles the density of these tracts of land. So again, it is a problem. Four, will it not result in undue traffic congestion or traffic hazards? There's been a lot of discussion that it creates a lot of traffic problems, especially the cut through the residential area. As a point on that, on France, just so you know, the Transportation Division said there's 26,000 cars per day on France Avenue, just to give you an idea of how much traffic is out there also. 5, does it conform to the provisions of this section and other applicable provisions of the code? I don't have a point on that. And 6, does it provide a proper relationship between the proposed improvements, existing structures, open space, and natural resources? And I think the answer is no. So when you look at what is required by the Planning Commission to look at regarding these projects, I think the answer is that this project does not fit for these parcels of land. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rick Swanson. I live at 4500 Hibiscus, which is semi-close to the project. I would reiterate what all the people here have said already to why I'm opposed to this project. But I also have another major concern in that I've got a daughter who goes to Cornelia Elementary School, which was built many, many years ago. And quite frankly, when I go there and talk to her teachers and other people at the school who have children there, they can't accommodate, I don't know how many of these 690 units or whatever are going to have elementary school kids, but if say 10% of them, they can't accommodate under the current structure of that school, they can't accommodate another 70 to 100 kids. And I have no idea who's moving into these properties, if they're, nobody's even told me how many of these are rentals versus ownership properties and stuff like that. But I think that the Planning Commission needs to strongly consider the infrastructure as it relates to schools and stuff that to jeopardize, Edina has got a heck of a reputation for great schools, and it's probably the reason that many of these people move their families in there. And when you start to compromise that, I think you're going to really mess things up in the short term and certainly in the long term. And I think that needs to be taken under careful consideration. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I welcome the opportunity to be here. I'm Bob Grubrud. I live at 4421 Ellsworth Drive, and I've lived here for 48 years. We moved here in 1970. So we've witnessed some rather dramatic changes in what's been going on France Avenue. When we moved in, there was a drive-in theater on 44th or 494 in France, and the Hedberg's gravel pit we could go to get sand for our kids' sandbox. So what I'd like to do is affirm, I think, what Paul Hughes said and several other people, that we've been counting on kind of a covenant with the city and with the Planning Commission about property west of France Avenue and how we're going to adhere to the 4-story height and the 30 units of density. And what I'm continually hearing, particularly on this project at 7200 and 7250 France, is the reiteration of the same project 3 times. Only this time we're coming back with twice as much as what has already been denied. And so I'm here to try to ask you if we could please help me and all of us residents understand what is the covenant that we have with the comp plan and with the zoning code, so we don't continuously be called up here to try to object to a project that does not conform to these standards, and to help us understand what kind of a project then would meet the requirements of this particular property, so that we can then work with a developer to come up with a plan that does in fact meet with everybody's approval. So we appreciate that, and somehow I don't know how we're going to confirm, the covenant that we believe we've had, and continually is challenged. So would appreciate that if you would do that for us. Thank you.
Members of the council, I just have a quick question. There was a point that was made about some part not needed to
Sorry, first can you say your name and address?
Hi, I'm sorry. My name is Vernon Hansberry. I live in Edina. And the question is, there was a part that didn't need...
Yeah.
Oh, my apologies. No. Vernon Hansberry, 7320 Gallagher Drive. Thank you. And that's Hansberry, H-A-R. So there was something that said that you don't need permission to build you don't build that one, you can build something else. What is that one like? What would that be like?
Carrie, do you want to answer that? Since you know the code in detail.
So based on the current zoning, you could build a 4-story, 48-foot tall medical office building, and based on the FAR, that would be allowed on that site, you could build a 113 square foot medical office. That request would come before the Planning Commission and City Council. They couldn't do it by right. If he met all of our standards, we couldn't say no, but there are certain sidewalk requirements, landscape requirements that they would have to abide by.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. So bringing it back to the Planning Commission for discussion. Anyone want to start? Somebody's got to say something.
In for a little. The issue on 72nd Street, I think, is above my pay grade as a planning commissioner. I think that's an engineering issue. I would like to think that engineering has looked at it, thought about it. The connectivity piece, I think, is hugely important. But the other issues that folks brought up about traffic to the neighborhoods is also important. I don't think it's tied to this project. I think it's tied to this city. And I think it's a separate issue that has, for all practical purposes, nothing to do with this project, but one that needs to be looked at, and clearly this project will impact it and impact whatever that solution is. So that's one piece that I would pull apart from the project and say they are not part and parcel, they are separate, but a request that it be looked at to find out if there is a better answer and what that might be. What's another piece to that? One of the pieces which is clearly an aside, the piece on schools, Again, on the Planning Commission, I don't want to pretend for a second that I'm an expert on Edina schools, but I do know there's 15%, in fact, slightly more than that, excess capacity that exists in the schools. Plus, I'm not certain what district that would fall into. I think that's very close to the Richfield line, is it not?
This would feed to the Edina schools in Cornelia.
Okay. Thank you.
Comments? Nobody's going to say anything. Okay.
So we have seen this project or variations of it several times. The first time it came through, it looked good, but there are things to change. Every iteration, in my opinion, has gotten better, and the developer has done a really diligent job, it seems, in addressing concerns. So thank you for that. One of the things that you added in this presentation, which we hadn't seen before, and I think it is important, is you had 3 or 4 slides where you showed, here is what this property would look like, and here's what you could have done. And you could have done that without coming before the Planning Commission. So what you were proposing was better than what you could have brought forward. And I think in that context, it's really important to talk about the process, because you're going through this process because you want to do something that actually is better than what you could have done without bringing it to us. So the process is being followed. As part of that process, our job is to advise the City Council. It's not to speak for the citizens of Edina. We're advisors to the City Council. We don't have a covenant to work with the public. We have a covenant to advise the City Council on what we think. And so I think it's important that people understand what this process is and what our responsibility is. So you've brought forward a project that some people think is too dense, and some people think will impact their neighborhoods. But equally, there are other people applauding it. And with anything that happens, you're never going to have everybody liking it, because change is hard. But you've come here 3 times, and I think we're fortunate that we have a really creative developer who's willing to come back 3 times. And so I support this. And I think these things have already been said within the 3 times you've been here. So we've all heard the landscaping and the water, the stormwater retention, the solar panels, the WUNERF. There are things that are not really in your control, like the traffic. I think we should try to do whatever we can to keep the traffic out of the neighborhoods. Whether that's traffic circles, whether it's making one-way streets, whatever we can do, we need to protect those neighborhoods. But I support this project the way it is. I think you've done a good job.
Thank you. Any other? Commissioner Nemiroff?
Wow. I appreciate everyone who spoke tonight. I appreciate, even starting with Carrie, I thought that was just, you gave an outstanding presentation. Clearly you thought about this a lot, and you've considered a lot of the issues, and you did a really good job of just walking us through the program. Mr. DeVolis, you made that was a better than average pitch. If this doesn't work, you should go into sales. But in all seriousness, you really identified a lot of the benefits to the city of Edina from this project. And I think, and you showed how you listened to the comments you received before. The citizens, both pro and con, I thought made a lot of good points. And I'm going to take a position that's somewhat contradictory, actually. I think this is a really nice project, but I'm going to go against it for the reason that we're recently talking about a 60-foot limit. And I feel like if we're saying 60-foot limit on October 5th, we should have a 60-foot limit on October 25th. And I think that what was decided in the comprehensive plan 10 years ago, I think that's not. I think, with all respect to the gentleman who spoke about that, and I've had many good conversations for it, and someone who I respect greatly, I think covenant's a strong word. I think a comprehensive plan sets out the guidelines the people at the time thought are for the benefit of the city of Edina, and I think it was thought through in 2008, but I'm hesitant to live by something that was done in 2008. Also, I wish to share that these are my personal feelings. Any commissioner up here that votes for this, I wish to say that I respect that vote, and I wish to explain to everyone the reason our job. I want to follow on what Sheila said. It's not just to advise the city council, but it's to take a look at what's the best for the city of Edina. And I believe that any planning commissioner tonight that recommends this project is listening to the neighbors and taking in the negative and considering it greatly, but looking at the big picture of what's best for the city of Edina. And I suspect that any planning commissioner that recommends this for approval has that in mind. We get a lot of easy ones here that are easy to turn down and easy to approve. You know, there are hard ones, though. There are well-spoken things on both sides, and that really takes a lot of consideration. Knowing that someone with a good case is going to be unhappy with your decision. So, I personally, for the reasons I explained, will recommend against this. I'm part of the Saltdale Working Group. I'm at the meetings where 60-foot limit is spoken. I feel like I'm part of saying something. I'm going to live with what I said. So I'm going to vote against this. But anyone that approves this, I want everyone in the audience to know they're not doing that out of disrespect. They're doing that out of their view of what is the best thing for the city of Edina. Thank you.
Commissioner Strauss.
This has been one of the more difficult projects to come to a decision. I have a great respect for the project. They have come back each time, as it's been mentioned, has been better than we've seen it. Repeatedly they were saying, well, the comp plan doesn't provide for this. The comp plan, there is a process to amend it. That's what we're doing. We are going through a very extensive with public involvement and design review. This meeting, the city has goals that they may not have been aware of 10 years ago, affordable housing goals. Amending the comp plan allows them to, achieve these very important goals. So I don't see that as breaking. We're not doing it just arbitrarily. We're going through a process. I think the most compelling part of tonight is the city staff comments. I think Planner Teague nailed all the points, the why this project should be approved. And I won't go, well, maybe I will. The stormwater issues, the pedestrian improvements, it's reasonable, meets the goals for affordable housing, and meets all the criteria for a PUD. I found that all compelling and persuasive. Thank you.
Yes. Any comments down here? You don't have to.
Okay. Well, first I'd like to address some of the comments that were brought up by residents, because I think there was a lot of things that people feel very strongly about. And as Commissioner Hamilton mentioned, traffic issues on 72nd are a big issue. And I think that definitely is a problem. I used to be on the Transportation Commission. I know the city is working very hard to try to make things better for pedestrians and cyclists. So when you're walking your child to school, for example, you don't want to get run over by a distracted driver. But that's going to take many years to do, and it is really a citywide problem. But certainly we don't want to just dump a bunch of cars on 72nd. And I think the project, tries to address that in a number of ways, which I think is really quite good. It's not perfect, but we need a citywide solution to that. I don't think this project alone is going to solve that problem. There was mention about, you're looking at these videos and these pictures, and it's a lot noisier when you're there in person, and that's absolutely true, right? You look at these things and it's glorified and everything. And that part of that is due to the speed of traffic on France Avenue, and that's one reason why I'm really not happy with the turn lane they want to have to slow traffic down. What do they call that? The deceleration lane, right. So what that does, that just allows the traffic on France to go at speed, which I think is a problem. But again, that's something that's part of the Southdale plan in terms of adding more traffic lights and kind of slowing down France. That's, not going to happen overnight. I guess one benefit to residents is that the building will block the noise from France, so you won't hear it. Another issue in terms of density, being on the Transportation Commission, to France is a county road, right? And it's a county road throughout all of Edina. Up from where I live, which is Morningside, where it's very, it's a 2-lane road. It's not nearly as busy, but it's still a county road, and there's still, a good number of cars on it. A project up there was just approved, which is 4500 France, which is 4 stories, and it's directly adjacent to single-family homes. It's not buffered the way this one is. And I think what's trying to happen is that we want to have as much, we don't want buildings like this in the middle of the Cornelia neighborhood, right? They're on France Avenue because it is a county road, because that's where we want the traffic, that's where we want the transit. When we build density like this, it allows us to have more transit. The people who live here are not going to have as many cars as somebody who lives in a single-family home with a 2 or 3 car garage. So, it will be added traffic, but it's, the goal, I think, is to have as much of that isolated on county roads rather than having inside neighborhoods where single-family homes are. And if you compare this to the 4500 France project, like I said, that one abuts directly against single-family homes. This one, there's a really pretty good buffer. There's no shadows or anything. You've got trees there and everything. I think it's a pretty nice distance away from any home. So I can't see that as that big of a problem. One thing I've been thinking about a lot is, and then comparing it, for example, to Estelle, which I wasn't on the Planning Commission for, but I watched with great interest. The problem with Estelle, I think, was that it didn't provide any kind of buffer, and it was like this tower next to these homes, right? And here they're putting in these townhomes, and you've got the buffer of trees. So I think that this is very, very different. And then the whole project is 6 to 7 stories. I think it's a completely different thing than that. So I think that's one reason why I like it a lot. Another thing I've been thinking about a lot, which doesn't have to do necessarily with their comments, is that the UN released this IPCC report a couple weeks ago, which talks about the problem of the whole world reaching 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer temperatures versus 2 degrees Celsius. And this is a problem we have to address in the next 20 years. And if we don't, and if we do everything the way we're doing today, and everyone drives a car, and we don't try to have people bike and walk and use transit, and we don't kind of build up density in specific areas, then, these 100-year storms that we're getting every 3 or 4 years are going to happen more and more frequently. And it's bad now at 1 degree Celsius. It's getting worse at 1.5. It'll be far worse at 2 degrees. So whether it's a snowstorm in April of 18 inches or whatever that was, followed by a 100-degree Memorial Day, the weather extremes are getting worse and worse. And I think Edina can contribute, a little bit and be a leader in this area in terms of how we address density in the city. And I think this is just a very smart way of dealing with density and height. I don't think it's not a tower. It's right on France Avenue. It's right where the transit is, where you want that transit to be. It will be more traffic. But I think that's a citywide problem that we have to address. So, thank you.
Thank you. Sue, you ready?
I think what makes this so hard is in looking at the location of this. This is really, I think, a unique location, west side of France, but in particular butts the last parcel that butts up to the residential area. So I think if we can navigate this one, all the rest hopefully will be much easier to follow. But it's also about process, and that is, I think we haven't done a good job yet to define where should that extra density go. Clearly, those are things we need to do, and as we sit up here and say that we're trying to make a decision as to what's best for the city, we need a plan. And I firmly believe in the comp plan. I don't believe that it becomes obsolete after 10 years, but certainly things have changed. A lot has changed in the last just 5 years. So we are so close. We are wrapping up the 2018 comp plan update, and I would be so reluctant to make a decision on this very important parcel or two without that knowledge. It sounds like we have been shared with some idea of where the Greater Southdale Work Group might go. But again, residents have not actually attended a public open house to be able to discuss those density requirements or the height. And I would be interested in hearing, is that something that they could accept? So yes, I'm trying to do what we've been asked to do as a planning commissioner. But again, it's really to do it in terms of what the confines of the role is. And right now, that is to interpret it according to the comp plan. If we have other knowledge, I think that's knowledge that also needs vetting by residents and some level of input. We are getting input tonight, which is a very good thing. I haven't heard a lot of input in support of it, and I'm sure it's out there. But if we had a public session to explain what the Southdale plan expects to see for the west side of France, particularly in this parcel, this area, this was the parcel that started the whole reason for the Southdale plan. It grew, certainly, but initially we were looking for guidance for that. So again, I'm feeling that we don't have that guidance. Even the guidance we have supposedly received so far does not match in any way, unfortunately, with this plan. And I think there's a lot of good about this plan. I hope all residents are looking at it and realizing how much this architect has done. Because in some ways, I hope he does come back with something that will match the guidelines. Because then I can 100% just be joyful about it. So that's where I stand. Obviously, everybody up here is trying to do their best in what they think the role is. Personally, I feel it's really a narrow confine about what we can do as a planning commissioner. And yes, we're advisory. We're advisory in the sense that what we say up here hopefully is being listened to by our city council members whom you elect. You don't elect us. And hopefully what we say up here will make an impact on them to decide accordingly. So I will not be voting in favor of this.
Thank you. All right, well, unless you have something more, you want done? Well, I'll make a couple comments before you make that motion. So I know we're talking a lot about the height, and I'm also on the Greater Southdale group, and actually, other than the little mezzanine, it is meeting what we've been working on for 3 years, and I think that we are so more advanced with how we're reviewing proposals in the Greater Southdale area because of that. So, no, it hasn't been officially approved, but we are making great strides, and this is where we want to see that density along France. And we are also accommodating that transition zone, which has been a very important piece of that. I'm sorry, I shouldn't just be staring at you, lecturing at you, Sue. Talk to the audience. But, so that has been a really important piece that we, with the townhomes and then with the Unarif and all of that to continue. So it is looking at the big picture, and I really see where it is accommodating that. So the glitch, I guess you could argue, because it's, more than 6 stories in that one area with the mezzanine, and I guess that could be the one thing I would consider, looking at if that's going to be a tough point. Try to keep it at the 6 stories completely. Again, as been mentioned by others, the comp plan, we do allow the process for it to be amended and the zoning ordinance to be amended, and there are reasons for that. So I think we are following that process. The affordable housing is huge. I think that's a great, benefit for the city, and I just think that this is the great location, and it's integrated, and it's not, we're not just getting a check. So I'm a big proponent for that. I do kind of have concerns with the architecture and with the final materials. So I think that I'd like you to still consider that a little, what Mick is saying, to bring some of those materials. I know you're doing that adjacent to the Unarif, but I think it's even more important to have it along France. Also, just for everyone to know, a condition of approval is that the right-in, right-out would be approved by Hennepin County. So without that, this would not move forward. So those are my comments. Did you?
Yeah, I think you summarized it, at least from my point of view, very nicely. The piece that I would say is, if this is right across the street from the access to the promenade. This is why all that money was spent there, to make it a delightful place for lots of people to enjoy it. Edina made an enormous investment in that Centennial Lakes property. One of the residents of that place spoke about that as a delightful place to be. This is right across the street from it. It is where density needs to be, ought to be, is designed to be, belongs in Edina. It seems very clear to me. And based on that, I would move that we approve the comprehensive plan amendment to increase the density based on the staff recommendation.
Is there a second?
A second.
Second. So for comments, Carrie added 3 conditions.
Yes.
And so include those 2? Or?
Indeed.
And does the second, or did you second? Who second? Do you?
Yes.
Okay. Other, so there's been a motion and a second. Is there more discussion? Okay, so, great.
I just want to say that I do think, again, that when we talk about density being the right spot, what's unique about this is there is that elementary school, and I forgot to acknowledge that, but that would be of some concern not having anything of this magnitude. When you even think about the Avador project, or even on on 66th, we've never had to really consider the issue of schools. And I live there and back in that area, and I'm guilty of that cut through to 100. It really is true. That is the street that people drive down in front of the school. So the school issue and the neighborhood issue, again, I would say that makes a case for a different level of density on the west side of France.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Why don't we do a roll call, or however you, so we can.
Commissioner Miranda.
Yay.
Commissioner Lee.
Nay.
Commissioner Strauss.
Yay.
Commissioner Nemerov.
Nay.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Hey.
Commissioner Berube.
Yes.
Chair Olson.
A. Yes. Thank you. Great. So, Carrie, when will this be in front of the City Council?
This is scheduled for public hearing on November 7th before City Council.
Is there 2 minutes?
On November 7th.
Correct.
He meant both pieces.
Thank you.
Right. So, that's right. So Carrie, so he didn't specifically say the rezoning to. All right, so next is the community comment. Matt, is there a motion to close the community
So
comment?
moved.
A second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so next we're moving on to reports and recommendations. Do we have anything on that?
Nothing this evening.
Correspondence and petitions, anything? Chair and member comments. Any updates on, you guys had a meeting yesterday, how'd that go?
Went well. Got a lot of feedback and, I'm still collecting it. And members of the work group, I really want to applaud the members of the Future in France work group. We got a lot of good, diverse opinions and bright people, and we're all collecting our feedback and still reviewing it, but I thought the meeting went pretty well. I don't know. John, what did you think? Anyone else? Lou, you were there? It went pretty well.
Last night's meeting?
Yeah.
No, it went very well. I had conversations the whole 2 hours with residents, so it was really good.
One other thing, I do want to say that our consulting team did a nice job last night. The presentations were good, and Dan Edgerton, who doesn't necessarily do as much of the presentations, but does kind of the event planning part of it and kind of the overview, did a nice job. And, so I thought it was a good meeting. Got a lot of good feedback, and I don't know, I'm starting to sound like a broken record.
Greater Southdale is going to be having their work group meeting tomorrow. So if anyone's listening, they're welcome to come. It's always a public meeting. People can come. Anyway, yeah. So it's tomorrow at 6:30, and it's at Public Works.
Any thought on the next public open house? That one that was getting postponed?
We
haven't met
We're
yet.
going to discuss. I mean,
I
tomorrow.
think we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought you meant since then. Okay.
No, we don't. Yeah, we haven't. Tomorrow's the big night where we're really going to be reviewing the chapter. And so, yeah. Pardon? Yes. Both, right?
More so the plan.
Plan versus the design guidelines. Yeah, we did that the last time. I missed that
Mick
one.
is revising the design guidelines at this time based on the feedback that he's been given.
Yeah.
So that one's lagging a little behind the plan at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments? Are there any staff, anything happening with that? Okay.
Nothing for me.
Good. Great. Okay. Yeah, it's like, wow.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.